All right. Hey, I wanted to just mention, um, I was telling Marcel that I went to my doctor yesterday, my oncologist,
Am vorbit deja cu Marcel și am spus că am fost la întâlnirea cu doctorul meu oncologist ieri.
and I've been having a lot of problems with my heart.
Mi-a spus că am o grămadă de probleme cu inima
I still do.
și încă am.
And they told me, well, that's because of the medicine that we're giving you. It causes heart failure.
Și da, din cauza medicamentelor care ți le-am dat, care face ca inima să cedeze.
Are you kidding me?
Am zis,
Are you
glumesc cu mine?
Golly, it was like, I mean, I've been taking this stuff now and nobody's told me that. So,
Nimeni nu mi-a spus despre asta.
so they changed some things up and maybe that will help.
Au
So.
schimbat câte ceva din tratament.
How stupid is that? We'll cure the cancer, but we're going to cure you with a heart attack. So.
Te vindecă de cancer și te omoară de atac de cor.
All right. We're going to take up. I just hope everybody's enjoying this. I'm not making a lot of progress on this. I'm taking my time. This is a really big issue for me about making disciples.
E un subiect important, din păcate n-am putut să parcurgem foarte mult din el.
And I hope it's helpful to you. I really do. I really do.
Sper că este folositor pentru voi.
We left off yesterday with the fact that disciples have to develop really good habits. I want to talk about some more of those.
Am vorbit de faptul că un ucenic trebuie să dezvolte obiceiuri bune.
We were talking when we finished yesterday about how long it takes to develop a good habit. Everybody remember how many days it was?
66.
66 days. I don't know.
Amintiți câte zile trebuie ca să dezvolți un obicei bun?
I don't have a clue how they come up with that number, but almost every book that I've read on it, and I have about 30 of them, said that
toate cărțile care le-am citit vorbesc de aceeași.
Said that's what it takes. So obviously that can vary from person to person.
Cu siguranță că variază de la persoană la persoană.
But I think one of the areas in discipleship that you have to zero in on.
Da, cred că unul dintre lucrurile pentru care nu înregistrezi progres.
To focus on.
E concentrarea.
Is to help the men to develop really good habits in their life.
Dar concentrarea trebuie să fie pe a ajuta oamenii să dezvolte obiceiuri bune în viețile lor.
I know one man specifically that was in our group that left the group. He still comes to church, but
cunosc un om care a fost cu noi la grup, încă vine la biserică, dar a părăsit grupul.
And I think one of the reasons that he stopped coming.
Și cred că unul dintre motivele pentru care a încetat să mai vină.
Is because he did not have good habits in his life.
Este pentru că nu avea dezvoltat obiceiuri bune în viața lui.
He stays up late watching sci-fi movies.
Stătea până târziu noaptea să uita la filme SF.
He just wastes his time. He's not married. He's 50 some years old.
Nu-i căsătorit, are 50 și ceva de ani și își risipește timpul.
It was obvious, I think, to me, it was obvious, I think everybody else, that he just was not fitting well into the group.
Și era evident pentru mine și probabil și pentru alții că nu se prea potrivește bine cu grupul.
But I shared with you yesterday that we develop a good habit today and it yields great benefit tomorrow. That's what we're after tomorrow.
Am vorbit cu voi că dezvoltarea unor obiceiuri bune azi te vor ajuta mâine.
So let's just take the example that we ended up with yesterday.
Și haideți să revenim la exemplu cu care am încheiat ieri.
No one can read the Bible for you, right?
Nimeni nu va citi Biblia pentru tine, așa?
If you own a business, your own personal business,
Dacă ai un business personal,
when you don't have time to complete the work that you want done, you can hire somebody.
dacă nu ai suficient timp ca să faci lucrurile care trebuie făcute, atunci ar fi bine să angajezi pe cineva.
And they can go out and they can do that job for you, right?
Și persoana respectivă ar putea să împlinească sarcinile pe care le dai pentru tine.
When I was, I was an owner in an architectural firm for a good number of years.
Am fost unul care aveam un birou de arhitectură pentru ani
And
buni.
we had so much work that there was no way that the partners could do the work. So we just went out and hired people to come in and help us.
Și aveam atât de mult de muncă încât nu puteam face față eu și partenerii și am fost obligat să mai angajăm și pe alții.
But in the Christian life, the person that's being discipled
Dar în viața creștină, persoana care devine ucenic
has got to develop the discipline of reading and studying the scriptures.
trebuie să își dezvolte disciplina aceea de a citi și de a studia Scriptura.
For me, this is non-negotiable for a disciple.
Pentru mine, lucrul ăsta este nenegociabil când e vorba de ucenicie.
It's non-negotiable. It's not something that you can forfeit. It's not something that you can put off. It's not something that
Nenegociabil. Nu este ceva ce poți să sari peste sau să pui deoparte.
it's not something that you can just wait around to sort of do in your life. You have to study the scriptures.
Nu este ceva ce poate să mai aștept în viața ta, ci trebuie să studiezi Scriptura.
In business terms, you cannot outsource this to somebody else.
În termeni de business, nu poți să te folosești de muncă altuia.
You can read all the books that you want to. You can read all the books that you want to.
Poți să citești toate cărțile care vrei,
But you cannot replace reading the scriptures.
dar nu poți înlocui citirea Bibliei.
I make it a goal of trying to read at least 2 books every week.
Mi-am făcut ca și scop să citesc cel puțin 2 cărți pe săptămână.
I read books by authors that I don't like,
Citesc cărți de autori care nu-mi plac,
by authors that I know would disagree with me.
autori care știu că nu sunt de acord cu mine.
I want to know how other people think.
Vreau să aflu cum gândesc alți oameni.
And then I read books on topics that I want to teach on or to preach on or whatever.
Și apoi citesc cărți pe anumite subiecte
Am
despre care vreau să vorbesc, eventual să predic sau să țin cursuri.
I'm doing a series on encouragement at my church. I'm in the 13th message.
Am deja vreo 13 mesaje în curs de încurajare.
I have a lot of books that I bought on encouragement.
Am luat o grămadă de cărți referitoare la încurajare.
Yesterday, I think it was yesterday, I got 3 books. You might
Ieri am luat 3 cărți.
Closer Than Close,
Mai aproape decât aproape.
Awakening to God,
Trezit de Dumnezeu.
No Easy Jesus,
nu un Iisus ușor.
Now, I can read one of these books. I can read a book like this right here in
Pot să
about
citesc o carte ca asta
in about 2 hours.
în aproximativ 2 ore.
I've learned how to speed read.
Am învățat cum să citesc rapid.
The other day I was it was I don't know how long ago it was. If I start reading a book, I'm generally through with it in 2 days.
Dacă încep să citesc o carte, în general, trec prin ea în 2 zile.
Just recently, I read 2 books
Recent am citit 2 cărți
in 2 days, just waiting in the doctor's office.
în 2 zile, în timp ce așteptam în birou la doctor.
I had to go. It's about an hour drive over there. My wife drives. I read.
Aveam de condus câte o oră până la medic și o oră înapoi și pe drum eu citeam.
I
Soția
sit in the
conducea.
waiting room. I read.
Stând în sala de așteptare, am citit.
They take me to the patient room. I read.
M-a dus în camera pacienților, am citit și acolo.
I read on the way back home.
Și am citit în drum spre casă.
And in 2 days of going to the doctor, I read 2 books like this. I read 2 of them in that time frame.
Ambele aceste cărți le-am citit în cele 2 zile.
I'm redeeming the time.
Am răscumpărat timpul.
I don't read every detail. I don't have to know every detail. I don't read every example.
Nu am citit toate detaliile, nu am citit toate exemplele.
But the
Da.
reading of these books never takes the place of my personal Bible study.
Citirea acestor cărți nu va lua niciodată locul studiului biblic.
It never takes that place.
Niciodată nu va lua acest loc.
It's a discipline.
E o problemă cu disciplină.
I get up in the morning, I go sit in a chair, I have a way of reading through the scriptures. I read the scriptures.
Mă așez în fotoliu și încep să citesc din Biblie.
I make sure that's what I do.
Și vreau să mă asigur că fac
So,
asta.
if you're going to be a disciple and you have to develop this in your group and you have to hold the brothers accountable for this.
Dacă vrei să fii un ucenic și trebuie să dezvolți asta în grupul tău, trebuie să fii unul responsabil, să vrei să dai socoteală.
You're going to have to ask them.
Și trebuie să îi întrebi.
Right? You're going to have to ask the question, are you meditating on and studying the scriptures?
Referitoare la meditarea și studiul Scripturii.
Let's say they don't know how to study the scriptures.
Meditai și citești Scriptura? Ca întrebare.
And you have to do what Sippy does, where you get one-on-one with somebody. I do that all the time.
Poți să faci ca Cipi, 1 la 1. Am făcut tot timpul și asta.
I mean, I got 2 courses on how to study the Bible.
Și am avut 2 cursuri cu privire la cum să
So,
studii.
you've got to help somebody get over the hump. They've got to get over that hump.
Trebuie să ajuți pe cineva ca să treacă hopul.
And this is not something that somebody else can do for you.
Nu este ceva ce altcineva poate să facă în locul tău.
This has to become a very deliberate a part of the discipleship mentality that you want to develop in the group, right? These disciplines.
Trebuie să fie un lucru cât se poate de deliberat, o mentalitate care trebuie implementată la nivelul grupului.
But I think, and I don't know how to say this, maybe you'll understand it.
Dar cred, nu știu exact cum să spun, dar sigur veți înțelege.
It's more than just reading the scriptures.
E ceva mai mult decât simpla citirea Scripturii.
It's actually studying the scriptures,
Este, de fapt, studiul Scripturii.
all right? And not everybody has all of the tools and the books that you may have, or even the motivation that you have.
Și nu toată lumea are cărțile și, eu știu, programele pe calculator sau uneltele care le ai tu la dispoziție.
And that's where you're going to have to gently nudge them into that direction, help them in that
De asta
direction,
trebuie ca cu blândețe să-l împingi în direcția potrivită.
so that they can develop that habit of reading the scriptures.
Ca și ei
Studying.
să dezvolte acest obicei de citire a Bibliei.
I think that you can develop a reading plan for everybody to follow if you want to.
Dacă vrei, poți să dezvolți un plan de citire a Bibliei
You know,
pentru
guys, let's do this. Let's all read the same thing this week. Let's read these
prieteni, haideți să
chapters.
facem asta săptămâna asta, să citim toți porțiunile astea de Scriptură.
And then when we get back into our discipleship group,
Și apoi, când ne întâlnim în grupul de ucenicie,
I want you to share
vreau să împărtășești
what you believe God was communicating to you in that passage.
ce crezi că Dumnezeu ți-a comunicat ție în cadrul acestui, în acest pasaj.
And it will be different for everybody.
Sigur, va fi diferit pentru fiecare.
If you took, say, John 17 and, Jesus' prayer for his disciples, or John 15 about abiding in the vine,
Rugăciunea pentru ucenici, sau Ioan 15, vița și mlădițele.
or Paul's prayer in Ephesians 1, or wherever you are.
Nu rugăciunea lui Pavel, orice vrei.
You hold them accountable, all right? You want to hold them accountable. Jesus held his disciples accountable.
Responsabil să dea socoteală, să fie responsabil.
And so you want to, as the facilitator, you're the one that's pushing the agenda. You're the one that's moving this group forward, helping them to grow.
Facilitator, adică conducătorul grupului de ucenicie, trebuie să stabilești agenda și să-i împingi în direcția potrivită.
So that they can go out and make other disciples, right? Let's go.
Să meargă și ei și să facă la rândul lor ucenici.
Go make disciples.
Mergeți și faceți ucenici.
Matthew 28. That's what God wants us to do.
Matei 28. Asta vrea Dumnezeu ca noi să facem.
And so that way there, when you actually come together, there can be a deeper level of discussion.
Și atunci când venim împreună, va fi un nivel mai adânc de discuție.
Hey, can you hang on a minute? I got a call from my cancer stuff. Hang on. Changing my medication because they told me it was causing heart failure. Golly. Oh, the medical world.
Maybe they don't expect to see you anymore.
No, I don't. It's just a side effect of the cancer medication. So, anyway, so we're talking about when you get together as a group that you want to have a deeper level of discussion.
Atunci când ai un grup de ucenicie, trebuie să se ajungă la un nivel profund de discuție.
So I want you to think of it this way. Let's just say that let's say that you have 4 men that you have in your group.
Haideți să presupunem că ai 4 oameni în grupul ăsta de ucenicie.
And you really believe that they have a heart for the discipleship effort that you want to make.
Și ești convins că ea o inimă deschisă pentru ucenicie și vor continua lucrarea.
Okay, but you know
Dar știi
that they are not mature
că ei
in
nu
the
sunt
Christian
maturi
life.
în viața creștină.
Right? You know that.
Știi asta.
You probably ought to have at least 2 of you in the group that are, at least. You ought to have at least 2 in the group that are
Sau
mature
cel
believers,
puțin
right?
doi în felul acesta în grup.
To kind of help field the questions that you're going to have.
Și trebuie să fii atent la ce întrebări trebuie să ai.
So the issue is not the quantity of how much you read.
Problema nu este cantitatea cât citești,
The issue becomes the quality of how much,
ci problema
right?
este
How much
calitatea
you understand, how much you comprehend.
cât cuprinzi.
I bet every one of us can sit down and read a passage of scripture, read a chapter in the morning, read several chapters, and when we finish reading the chapter, not be able to tell somebody what we just read because we read through it too fast.
S-ar putea ca tot să fie experimentat faptul că stai și citești un capitol, 2, 3, 7 și la urmă stai și te gândești, dar ce am citit, nu mai ții minte fiindcă ai citit prea repede.
We had 50 other things on our mind,
Și ai alte 50 de lucruri în mintea ta,
and we were just going through the routine that we go through every day.
intri în rutina citirii din fiecare zi, dar nu ești cu mintea acolo.
I struggle with this all the time, man. I'm being transparent. I struggle with it all the time.
Și eu tot timpul am avut de lupta cu asta.
And I wind up having to go back and reread what I just read.
Dar am mers înapoi și am recitit ceea ce deja am citit.
To make sure I'm writing notes. I have notebooks. I have all kinds of notebooks. Let's see if I can find one. Maybe one's in the other room.
Și am tot
Where
felul
I write down
de unde scriu
page after page after
pagină după
page
pagină
of what I read that day. Deuteronomy, Proverbs,
și scriu ce
First
citesc
Chronicles, Malachi, Romans, Psalms.
what
Just goes
you
on
know,
and on and on.
what you write down there. A summary
No.
or what you say, or some thoughts, or
I write down, and I do it in 2 ways. I want
ce scrie acolo, rezumatul a ceea ce a citit sau anumite gânduri care vin și spune că face în 2 feluri.
I write down what I felt like the Lord was speaking to me about.
Scriu ceea ce cred că Domnul vrea să-mi vorbească.
And then I go through, I have a whole nother way of doing it. You see up there at the top, Romans chapter 1.
Și apoi am un alt mod, aici am pe Romani
And I make my own personal commentary
și îmi fac comentariile mele personale.
on a book of the Bible that I just set apart, and I just read through it. I write down what it means. I actually
Care am citit-o și scriu ceea ce înseamnă, ce cred eu că înseamnă versetul respectiv.
I actually have when I do this part of it, I come in here, I turn on my computer so that if I get to a word, I can look that word up. But it's not like I'm developing a message, okay?
Uneori vin și deschid computerul ca să mă uit la un anumit cuvânt, dar nu-i pentru a dezvolta un mesaj.
I'm not trying to develop a message.
Nu intenționez să predic din asta.
I'm trying to have intimate fellowship with God through His Word.
Și vreau să am doar părtășie intimă cu Dumnezeu prin cuvântul lui.
And then I want to pray through that word,
Și apoi vreau să mă rog
which I do.
pe baza ceea ce am citit.
Last night we had a prayer meeting at church, and I prayed through, see if I can find it.
Aseară am avut timpul de rugăciune la biserică și ne-am rugat.
Let's see if I can. Last night we just had prayer meeting at church, and I prayed through Psalm 29.
Și ne-am rugat din Psalmul 29,
30, 31,
30, 31,
32, and 34.
32 și 34.
I just opened the Bible and I just prayed from it.
Am deschis
Oh, bless the Lord at all times.
și
You know,
am de aici
you're my,
rugându-ne.
you're my refuge. You're my rock.
Tu ești refugiul meu, tu ești stânca mea.
Why am I doing that? Somebody tell me why I'm doing it that way. Somebody help me.
Ce fac în felul acesta? Cineva să mă ajute, să-mi spună.
You're just encouraging and just reading that, not a Bible study, but just giving the pray, so they can pray.
I'm modeling prayer.
Îmi modelez rugăciune.
I'm rather than just sitting there and try to figure out what to pray for.
În loc să stau și să mă gândesc pentru ce ar trebui să mă rog,
I'm letting the Bible
las Biblia
become my prayer.
să devină rugăciunea mea.
Right?
Da?
If you just let people just kind of pray, they're going to pray for Aunt Mary's toe and John's headache and.
Dacă lași oamenii să se roage așa la liber, să vor ruga pentru durerea de cap al lui Ion, degetul de la picior al Mariei.
But if you can teach them to open up the Word of God and pray from the Word of God,
Dar când îi vei învăța să deschidă Biblia și să se roage din cuvântul lui Dumnezeu,
you can pray. I could pray all night.
poți să te rogi toată noaptea atunci.
I marked my Bible up. This is not my reading Bible. This is my study Bible. This is just the one that I preach out of. But I have a reading Bible in my living room, and that's the one that I mark up.
Dar am o Biblie de citire în care fac însemnări.
And it's the one that I take to church for prayer.
Și e cea pe care o iau la biserică pentru rugăciuni.
So we had prayer last night. We started at 6 o'clock. We got through at 8 o'clock.
Și am avut rugăciune de la 6 la 8 seara.
Right. I'm just trying to help be a model. So that's what the facilitator
Să fiu un model pentru ei
in the group is doing. Right?
Și apoi grupul va face.
So let's say that you are facilitating the discipleship group. You've started it. You should.
Să spunem că ai început un grup și ești facilitatorul acelui grup.
You've got these believers with you, and you ask about praying, but it doesn't. After about 5 minutes, you're through.
Ai pe acei bărbați cu tine și îi spui să se roage și în 5 minute au terminat.
I think you want to help change the direction of that.
Și vrei să schimbi direcția asta.
But how do you do it? You become the what? Tell me. You become.
Tu devii un model.
You become the model.
Tu devii model.
You become the example.
Exemplu.
Jesus was always the model
Domnul Iisus a fost totdeauna modelul
of what he wanted his disciples to become.
cu privire la ceea ce dorea ca ucenicii să devină.
So you become that model for them. You become that example for them.
Deci, tu să fii model pentru ei.
You want to teach the disciples, that the men that you're discipling, that you don't want them to ever be in a hurry. when they're reading the Bible. We're just talking about one discipline here.
Învață de asemenea ca niciodată să nu te grăbești când citești prin Biblie.
The goal is not how much you read,
Scopul nu e cât de mult citești,
it's how close you allow the scriptures to draw you to God.
ci cât permiți să te apropie Scriptura de Dumnezeu.
It doesn't matter to me on any day how much I read. It just does not matter to
Nu
me.
contează pentru mine cât de mult citesc în fiecare zi.
As long as I believe that I've allowed God to speak to me and that in some way that I've actually heard him and been encouraged.
Atâta timp cât te
by
las
his
pe
word.
Dumnezeu să-mi vorbească și aud glas.
So I would say it this way. You want to help the young believers to develop really good habits.
Vrei să ajuți noi credincioși să dezvolte obiceiuri bune.
Why is that? Come on, listen to me. Why is that?
De ce e asta?
Because you never mature by accident.
Pentru că niciodată nu vei deveni matur prin accident sau accidental.
Growth is intentional. It's deliberate.
Creșterea este intenționată, deliberată.
You don't stumble into spiritual growth.
Dacă nu te poticnești în creșterea spirituală. Nu te împiedici de creșterea spirituală așa accidental.
These guys that get paid millions of dollars to be athletes,
Sunt oameni care cheltuie milioane de dolari pentru a deveni atleți buni.
they don't just get out of bed and go down for the game.
Nu le nevesc în pat și apoi se duc pentru să joace jocul respectiv.
They practice and practice and practice and practice and practice.
Exersează și exersează. Se antrenează.
And it's not accidental. And if they don't do that, they won't be any good. I don't care how much talent they have and how much skill they have.
Și dacă nu fac asta, nu realizează nimic, indiferent ce talente au și cât de îndemânatici sunt.
You have to develop your skills or they will atrophy.
Trebuie să-ți dezvolți abilitățile tale.
So it's the same way spiritually.
La fel este și spiritual.
If you don't develop these habits that we're talking about,
Nu vei dezvolta aceste obiceiuri despre care vorbim,
they will atrophy on you.
ci se vor
They
atrofia,
will go away.
vor dispărea de la tine.
I go to my dentist and I lean back on the chair
Am dus la dentist și m-am...
and he's got this sign in the ceiling.
Și am
I'm
văzut,
leaning back like this
m-am uitat cu privirea în tavan
and it says, if you ignore your teeth, they will just go away.
Dacă îți ignori dinții, atunci poți să pleci, dacă nu te interesează dentura.
So if you just ignore these spiritual disciplines in your life, they will just go away.
Dacă ignori disciplinele spirituale din viața ta, pur și simplu pleacă.
So what we want to say, the way we want to think about this, you'll write this down, is that spiritual growth is always intentional and deliberate. Spiritual growth is always
Creșterea spirituală este întotdeauna intențională și
intentional.
deliberată.
And that's why, everybody listen, this is the point.
Și,
That's why you have to set goals.
și de aceea, și ăsta e punctul important, trebuie să stabilești obiective sau scopuri.
If you don't have any goals, you won't reach any goals.
Dacă nu ai niciun obiectiv, nu vei atinge niciun obiectiv.
If all that you do is have a meeting
Tot ce vei avea este o întâlnire și atât.
But you don't have any goals for that meeting.
Dar dacă nu ai niciun cel cu acea întâlnire,
At the end of the day, you probably are not going to accomplish very much.
la sfârșitul zilei, probabil că nu ai realizat prea mult.
And I believe that in a discipleship group, that this is critical.
Și
Setting
cred că
goals.
în cadrul unui grup de ucenicie este critic lucrul ăsta.
So here's what happens.
Atunci ce se întâmplă?
If you have somebody in your discipleship group,
Dacă
in a
ai pe cineva în
small
grupul
group,
de ucenicie, în grupul mic,
that for whatever reason lacks the motivation to become a disciple of Christ,
care pentru orice fel de motivație îi lipsește dorința de a fi un ucenic al lui Hristos,
if you're not careful,
și dacă nu ești atent,
trust me, if you're not careful,
dacă nu ești atent,
their lack of motivation
lipsa lor de motivație
is going to impact the rest of the group.
va avea un impact asupra restului grupului.
It will kind of saturate through the group. It will infiltrate the group.
Va satura și va infiltra în cadrul grupului.
Oh, I just didn't have time.
Oh, n-am avut timp.
I didn't do that this week.
Oh, nu, n-am
And I-
putut fac asta săptămâna asta.
And I didn't do it last week.
Și n-am făcut-o nici aia trecută.
I want to share this with you. This is I have one brother that's in our discipleship group.
Împărtășesc cu voi asta. Am avut un frate în grupul de ucenicie.
He's not ready to go out and start a discipleship group, trust me.
Și nu e pregătit să înceapă el un grup de ucenicie, credeți-mă.
But he has a real struggle in his marriage.
Dar are probleme serioase în căsnicia lui.
And sometimes in that group,
Și uneori, în cadrul acelui grup,
something will come up and he will speak about his wife in a demeaning way, in a negative way.
se ajunge cu vorba la ceva și începe să vorbească într-un mod înjositor referitor la soția lui.
Right? It's just kind of a casual smirk. It's just kind of a off the cuff remark about his wife.
Sunt chestii așa, ca și cum n-ar băga în seamă, nu ceva foarte disprețuitor.
Now, what do you think that I should do, or the person that's leading should do? The person that's leading in our group doesn't do it, so I have to do it.
Și pentru că persoana care conduce grupul nu a făcut-o, trebuie să fac eu.
I reprove him.
L-am mustrat.
I reprove him.
L-am mustrat.
I said, brother, that's not how God wants you to talk about your wife.
Am zis, frate, nu așa vrea Dumnezeu să vorbești despre soția ta.
Right? Everybody understand what I'm telling you.
Știți, înțelegeți tot ce
So,
v-am spus.
because if he does it, somebody else is going to do it.
Pentru că dacă el face asta, și alții sunt încurajați să o facă.
If somebody brings up somebody else in the church,
Dacă cineva aduce pe altcineva în biserică,
that maybe they are struggling with in their relationship with them,
și poate că au și ei probleme în relații,
you cannot let that digress into a discussion about the other person. You cannot do that.
nu poți să
You have to
lași
stop it.
devieze discuția spre cealaltă persoană, trebuie să o oprești.
Because the next thing you know, everybody will be somehow talking about other people.
Pentru că dacă nu o faci, în momentul următor toți vor vorbi despre alții.
So you have to kind of keep it generic, if that's the right word.
Trebuie să păstrez un generic, dacă e cuvântul corect.
But let's just say being on time.
Fii în timp.
It's an issue to me that
E o
people
problemă,
in the group are on time.
e o problemă pentru mine când oamenii din grup sunt la timp.
When we first started meeting, we met at a restaurant.
Când am început prima dată întrunirea, ne-am întâlnit la un restaurant,
Because there was only like 3 of us.
fiindcă am fost doar 3.
And so, you know, hey, we're going to be there at 9:00. Everybody be there at 9.
Ne-am dat întâlnire la 9, toți au fost la 9 acolo.
So the way that it works now is that we start at 9, but the ladies, they fix breakfast.
Problema este că noi acum ne adunăm la 9 și surorile ne pregătesc mâncare.
So you can be a little late for breakfast.
Pot să întârzi puțin pentru breakfast, pentru micul dejun.
But I don't want you to be late for the discipleship group.
Dar nu vreau să întârzi la grupul de ucenicie.
Being somebody that is committed to attending.
Fii cineva care este dedicat participării.
Right? There has to be a commitment to what you're doing.
Să fie o dedicare cu privire la ceea ce faci.
You are facilitating commitment. You are developing commitment.
Nu ești cel care facilitezi dedicarea.
This is not being legalistic.
Și nu e o problemă legalistă aici.
This is what the Christian life, this is what being a disciple actually requires.
Asta este viața creștină și, de fapt, asta cere ucenicul care vrea să facă ucenici.
It's being committed.
Să fie dedicat.
Can somebody miss the meeting? Sure they can.
Cineva poate să lipsească, dar sigur că se
But
întâmplă.
what if they miss half of the meetings?
Dar ce se întâmplă dacă lipsește la jumătate de întâlnire?
Just because they overslept or they, you know, they just were too tired. And
Sunt prea obosit.
I'm super tired every week. I'm
Sunt
super
în fiecare
tired.
săptămână supra-obosit.
This medicine just drains me.
Medicația asta mă epuizează.
But I show up every week.
Dar îmi fac prezența în fiecare săptămână.
Unless I have to be out of town, I'm going to be at the discipleship meeting.
Și dacă nu sunt plecat din
It's a priority.
localitate, sigur sunt la grupul de ucenicie.
Let's say that you have some assignments that you want people to do.
Haideți să spunem că ai dat ceva teme de făcut celor cu care te întâlnești.
You want everybody to read a certain passage of scripture and make some notes on it or whatever you may
Vrei,
want.
de exemplu, ca cineva să citească anumite pasaje din Scriptură și să noteze anumite lucruri din el.
Right? You want to hold everybody accountable, right?
Vrei să fie responsabil fiecare dintre cei prezenți.
You want to keep pushing the envelope. You want to keep pushing it.
Vrei să continui să îi împingi în direcția bună.
I don't think that Christ, when he was discipling the men that he discipled,
Nu cred că Hristos, atunci când uceniciza pe oamenii care i-au ucenicizat,
that he just accepted one excuse after another.
accepta scuză după scuză.
He asked people to follow him, right?
Da, au fost oameni care l-au urmat
And they came up with excuses.
și au venit cu scuze.
Lord, we won't follow you, but can I go? I got to go bury the dead.
Știi, Doamne, vreau să te urmez, dar
Da.
mai întâi trebuie să mă îngrop tatăl.
I got a business. I got to go take care of that first.
Știi, am o afacere pe rol acum, trebuie să rezolv
You know,
lucrurile.
I just got married,
Știi, tocmai m-am căsătorit.
and so I want to take about a year or two before I join you.
Conform legii, un an sunt scutit și de militarie, deci după vreun an te urmez, Doamne.
I don't think I can be with you, but half the time,
Nu știu dacă pot să viu cu tine, nu prea am timp.
listen, this was a full-time commitment that Christ was asking
Al urma pe Hristos înseamnă o dedicare deplină, full-time.
from these disciples.
Asta cere de la ucenicii lui.
And if we present it in any other way, in a softer way, I'm not saying there's not some latitude. I'm not saying that. I'm not Jesus. You're not Jesus.
Și dacă tu te prezinți altfel, trebuie să... Nu vreau să spun că eu sunt Isus și nici
But the softer that we become in our holding one another accountable,
Dar cu cât lăsăm mai moale lucrurile în ce privește
I can
responsabilitatea,
assure you that the less effective your group is going to be.
cu atât mai neeficient sau mai puțin eficient va fi grupul tău.
So let's say you have a group and somebody's not accountable
Să spunem că ai un grup
and they're not responsible.
și nu ești responsabil,
It's okay if they drop out. It's okay, in my mind, if you actually ask them to leave. That's a harsh thing.
ok, pentru mine să părăsească grupul unii sau chiar să le cer tu să-l părăsească.
Because just a little bit of leaven leavens the whole lump, right?
Dacă sunt de genul ăsta, fiindcă puțin a luat, dospește toată plămădea.
So subtractions are not always a really bad thing.
Așa că, eu știu, purificările nu sunt neapărat lucruri rele.
I think in our group that, while you were there, that was probably the core of our group. I don't know who was there on that day, but we've had 3 or 4 other men that just didn't have the commitment to be there. And they're no longer with us.
Când ai fost Iori, nu mai știu exact cine a fost, dar avem vreo 2-3 care nu prea sunt dedicați prezenței la grup.
And nobody's asked them to come back.
Și nimeni nu s-a dus după ei să le spună, vai, nu mai ați venit de mult, veniți înapoi.
You know, it's like every week, where's Ed? Where's Ed?
Fiecare săptămână se întreba, păi da, unde e Ed?
We had a Chinese brother, I forget what his name was. Where is he?
Aveam un frate chinez. Unde-i frate?
I don't know. I don't know. So, so the mentor has got to, all of this, being on time, completing assignments, attending regularly,
Toate astea la timp, a participa regulat, a-ți face temele.
that's a part of what it really means to develop a discipleship group. You're developing commitment.
Asta ce înseamnă să dezvolți un grup de ucenicie.
You cannot do this in a church setting.
Nu poți să faci asta în cadrul larg al bisericii.
If you do it in a church setting,
Dacă o faci în cadrul serviciului
there's
bisericii,
a good tendency that you will begin to lord over your flock.
atunci vei fi obligat să începi să domnești peste turmă.
So I want you to think, this is the word that I want you to think about. I may have given it to you already.
La cuvântul acesta la care vreau să
is I want you to think of discipling other people as coaching them.
Aș vrea să gândiți la ucenicizarea altor oameni ca fiind lucrarea antrenorului. Care
You're the coach. What does a coach do?
Ce face antrenorul unei echipe?
What does a coach do?
Ce face antrenorul?
A coach pushes his players to become the best that they can become.
Antrenorul încearcă să forțeze limitele jucătorilor ca să își depășească limitele și să devină ceea ce trebuie să devină.
When they say that practice starts at 1 o'clock in the afternoon,
Când spune, fiți atenți, antrenamentul începe la 1 după amiază.
you're going to be there at 1 o'clock in the afternoon, or you're not going to be able to play.
Vei fi acolo la 1, dacă nu, nu vei fi lăsat să joci.
Could you imagine Ronaldo or Lionel Messi showing up 3 hours after practice started?
Vi-l imaginez pe Ronaldo sau pe Messi venind la 3 ore după ce a început antrenamentul?
Or you got 20 players and only 12 of them show up for practice?
Sau din 20 de jucători, numai vreo 12 vin
You
să...
can't have a team. You cannot have a team under those circumstances.
Nu poți să ai o echipă adevărată în
And the
astfel de
facilitator is pushing for this commitment.
Facilitatorul este cel care presează oamenii spre dedicarea asta.
I call it gently nudging.
Numesc asta împingere
nudging.
așa,
Right? Gently pushing,
împingere cu blândețe,
gently motivating, whatever you want to call it.
motivare cu blândețe, cum vreți să o numiți.
So, in all of this, what you're trying to do, everybody look at me just for a minute. What you're trying to do, everybody look here, is that you're trying to stretch your group. You're trying to stretch them
Întinzi grupul
outside of their normal comfort zone.
dincolo de zona lor normală de confort.
You want to stretch them beyond their limit.
Vrei să-i ajuți să treacă dincolo de limitele lor.
And so that's why I'm going to give you 3 words. You'll write these down.
De-aia v-am dat, vă dau 3 cuvinte și scrieți.
That's why the goals that you set for the group
De aceea ai nevoie de țeluri sau scopuri pentru grup.
they have to be specific.
Trebuie să fii specific.
They have to be well defined.
Trebuie să fii bine definit.
They have to be measurable.
Trebuie să fie măsurabil.
And they have to be achievable.
Și realizabil.
So here's the principle. I'm going to give you a couple
Țelul
principles.
trebuie să fie specific,
take a break.
definit, măsurabil și realizabil.
If you're not able to challenge the people in your group,
Dacă nu ești în stare să provoci oamenii din grup,
if you don't challenge them, let me put it that way,
dacă nu îi provoci,
then they will never be motivated to change.
atunci nu vor fi niciodată motivați să schimbe.
So here's what you will find with new disciples. Here's what you're going to find.
Iată ce se întâmplă când vrei să faci ucenici.
People only change when they want to change.
Oamenii se schimbă doar atunci când vor să se schimbe.
Or
Sau
when they have to change.
când n-au încotro, trebuie să se schimbe.
If your boss came to you and he said,
Dacă vine un șef la tine și spune,
you're here late every day.
ajungi aici târziu în fiecare zi.
You're not going to have a job
Nu vei mai avea slujbă dacă continui.
if you don't start showing up on time.
Dacă nu te arăți la timp de acum înainte.
Right? You're going to be motivated to change, right?
Deci trebuie să fii motivat să te schimbi.
I used to work at a place where people would get there late and they leave early to make up for it.
Am lucrat într-un loc unde oamenii veneau mai târziu și plecau mai devreme.
Insane. I got there early and left late.
Nebunie. Eu veneam mai devreme și plecam mai târziu.
So you've got to be the encourager, the motivator.
Tu trebuie să fii cel care încurajează, motivatorul.
To help these men make the changes in their life that they have to make.
Pe oameni să facă
Right.
schimbările care trebuie să le facă în viață.
I would love for each of you, when we finish this study, I may not, I won't even get through with this week. We'll take it up next week, right?
Nu știu dacă reușim să terminăm.
I'm going to keep teaching this course next week rather than you.
Viitoare cu ea.
I would love for, say, Yort and Marin, y'all go to the same church, right? To just set a goal. Hey, let's the two of us get together. Let's create a discipleship group.
Voi doi împreună puteți crea un grup.
Here's two mature brothers. I'm not
Doi
telling you to do that,
oameni maturi.
but I think that's the way you would want it to work.
Da, cred că asta e
You can
modul
set the
în care
goal.
trebuie să lucrăm. Să
You
stabilim,
can define the goals that are measurable and achievable.
definiți scopul, să fie măsurabil, realizabil
And then go find some men
și apoi găsiți câțiva
you
oameni
know need to grow.
care știți că au nevoie de creștere.
This is a long-term process. This is not a week or two. This is not 2 months.
E un proces pe termen lung, nu e de o săptămână.
This may be a commitment that you have for several years, 2 or 3 years,
E nevoie de o dedicare pentru câțiva ani,
so that you can prepare those men to go out and to do what you're doing.
și vreau să pregătiți oamenii ăștia pentru ca ei să meargă apoi în afară și să facă ce trebuie să facă.
Okay, any questions before we take a break?
Întrebări dacă aveți înainte de la pauză. Nu.
Is this clear as mud or what? All right. All right. Let's take a 10-minute break. It's 5 after, so we'll come back at 15 now. This idea of people changing will always be a problem for you as a mentor, as a facilitator, right?
Când oamenii se schimbă, totdeauna e o problemă pentru tine ca facilitator.
Because not everybody that you bring into your group is going to want to change.
Pe cei care, când nu se schimbe problema, pentru că nu toți cei care îi aduci din cei care îi aduci în grup vor să schimbe.
People are not inclined to change.
Oamenii nu sunt înclinați spre schimbare.
If you don't figure that out early, you're in trouble.
Și dacă n-ai observat asta mai devreme, ai probleme.
You've got to have a little patience with people. You got to give them some time to actually
Trebuie să ai
change.
puțină răbdare cu oamenii și să le dai ceva timp.
They may be well-intentioned.
Poate să fie bine intenționat.
They may come into the group with the best intentions on the planet.
Poate să vină la grup cu cele mai bune intenții de pe planetă.
But for whatever reason, they're very set in their ways and they do not want to change.
Dar, pentru anumite motive, rămân pe cărările lor și nu vor să schimbe.
So let's think of it this way. Let's think of it this way. All right, you ought to write this
Trebuie
down.
să gândim la asta în felul următor.
Change has to be introduced to the group.
Schimbarea trebuie să fie introdusă grupului. prezentat.
It cannot be forced on the group,
Dar nu poate fi forțată, impusă grupul.
right? Everybody get that?
Toți ați înțeles asta?
We're not dictators,
Nu suntem dictatori,
right? We are leaders.
suntem conducători.
We're leading, and you cannot dictate.
Care conducem, nu trebuie să dictezi,
You have to introduce,
trebuie să
encourage.
prezinți și să încurajezi.
So one of the things that you have to do
Deci unul din lucrurile pe care tu trebuie să le faci
is to figure out
este să găsești o posibilitate
and give them all of the reasons why they need to change.
și să le dai toate motivele pentru care ei trebuie să se schimbe.
These have to be reasonable. They have to be achievable.
Trebuie să fie rezonabilă, realizabilă.
They have to be well defined. They have to be measurable.
Trebuie să fie bine definită, măsurabilă.
So that means that as the facilitator, you have to be a really excellent communicator.
Deci tu, ca și facilitator, trebuie să fii un excelent comunicator.
Jesus was an excellent communicator, wouldn't you say?
Domnul Iisus Hristos a fost un comunicator prin excelență.
He used stories, he used parables, he created doctrine, he did all kinds of things.
Pildă, istorioară, doctrină.
He spoke graciously and kindly. He spoke authoritatively. He spoke.
A vorbit autoritar, cu har,
He reproved when he had to.
și mustrat când a trebuit.
He told Peter, he said, "Get behind me, Satan."
I-a spus lui Petru înapoi a mea, Satan.
I don't think I've ever said that to anybody, but I don't think I ever will.
Nu cred că aș vrea să spun așa ceva cuiva.
He was a communicator.
A fost un comunicator.
So your job as a facilitator is to communicate what these goals that you're really trying to achieve.
Deci tu, ca și facilitator, trebuie să
And so-
comunici scopurile pe care le ai în vedere și care trebuie, obiectivele care trebuie urmărite și
So
atinse.
here's what you're doing. Everybody listen carefully. You're setting the tone for the meeting.
Tu, ca și facilitator, stabilești tonul întrunirii.
The guy that leads my meeting,
Cel care conduce întrunirea noastră,
his name is James. He's a wonderful brother.
numele lui e James, un frate minunat.
He and his wife were missionaries in China,
El și cu soția au fost misionari în China.
and they came back after COVID. They'd still be there if it hadn't been for COVID. So,
Au venit din cauza COVID-ului înapoi.
and the International Mission Board has trained them to go to Thailand.
Și bordul de misiune internațional i-a pregătit să meargă în Thailanda.
So I'm giving him all the experience that he can gain
Mi-am dat toată experiența pe care el o poate acumula.
to either go to Thailand or to be a pastor somewhere.
Fie că va merge în Thailanda sau că va fi un păstor undeva.
I'm kind of helping push him out the door, if I can say it that way.
Dar l-am ajutat împingându-l pe ușă înainte.
But he struggles.
Dar are probleme. Lupte.
He's still inclined just to do a Bible study.
Și este încă înclinat să facă studiu biblic tot timpul.
He hasn't figured out how when he comes in and he begins to lead, that he sets the tone
el nu știe cum să facă atunci când
or
vine,
the meeting.
începe să conducă și el stabilește tonul pentru întâlnire.
That he's the one to create the initiatives, the new initiatives that the group needs.
Este cel care creează inițiative
Develop.
noi.
And you got to find a way. You got to
Sure.
ask the questions in the meetings so that you can determine if the disciples are actually being successful, if they're meeting the goals.
Și trebuie să găsești întrebările pe care să le pui în cadrul întrunirii ca să vezi dacă ucenicii sunt în drumul lor spre împlinirea obiectivului.
You have to ask the questions.
Trebuie să pui întrebări.
You have to get an answer.
Trebuie să obții un răspuns.
If you get the wrong answer, then the discipleship group as a unit is there to begin to hold that individual accountable.
Și dacă este un răspuns negativ, trebuie ca toți ceilalți din grup să fie acolo și să fie responsabili din socoteală unii alții,
To help them.
ca să-l ajute. De fapt.
Maybe you have to call them up or text them.
Poate îl sună sau îi trimite un mesaj.
You know, have you done this today?
Ai făcut asta astăzi?
You know, what are you struggling with? How can I help you?
Cu ce te frămânți? Cum te pot ajuta?
So the biggest problem will always be, the biggest problem that you're going to have as a facilitator
Problema pe care tu vei avea ca și facilitator
is knowing whether or not what you have communicated
este de
actually
a
made a difference.
dacă ceea ce tu comunici face cu adevărat o diferență.
In other words, you've got to figure out whether or not communication is really taking place.
Trebuie să îți dai seama dacă are sau nu loc comunicarea, de fapt.
Let's think about this from a really practical perspective. Let's just say
Privim dintr-o perspectivă foarte practică.
that as a pastor, all right, you know, I guess me and Cornell and Marcel, we're the only actual pastors, right?
Cred că doar eu, Cornel și Marcel suntem păstori.
Is that correct?
E corect? Yes.
I'm asking a question.
Yes.
All right, the other men may be staff people or whatever.
Yeah.
But let's just say,
Oameni în conducere, poate, dar nu
if we
păstori.
think back about all of the Bible studies that we have taught,
Și gândiți-vă la toate studiile biblice pe care le-am discutat, le-am făcut.
I mean, we've prepared, we've studied,
Ne-am pregătit, am studiat,
but at the end of the service,
dar la sfârșitul serviciului,
I wondered if anybody understood anything that I communicated.
aș vrea ca toți cei prezenți să fi înțeles tot ce am comunicat.
Or if they were even motivated.
Sunt ei cu adevărat chiar motivați
To implement into their life what I just taught.
să implementeze în viețile lor ceea ce i-am învățat deja?
Right? Isn't that the problem that we struggle with, Cornell?
Păi așa că asta e problema cu care ne frământăm? Yes.
Talk to me. Tell me. Help me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's the impression that you are talking to dumb air.
That's right. You're just talking. Nobody's, you know, people are kind of drowsing out or whatever it may be.
Uneori ai impresia că vorbești la urechea surdă.
It's very important to get connected to the people and, you know, to hear from them, you know, amen.
Feedback.
And, oh, yes, feedback, yeah.
Absolutely. See, now that's a great point, Cornell, because the small group setting, not the big church group setting, but the small group setting allows for that. It actually demands that.
E important să ai un feedback de la oameni și asta se poate întâmpla în grupurile mici. În mod special, nu poți o biserică mare.
It demands that you have feedback.
Se impune să ai feedback.
When I'm preaching or teaching at church, I have this one lady that constantly interrupts me.
Când predic sau învăț la biserică, avem o soră care în mod constant mă întrerupe.
You're fortunate, George, she didn't interrupt you.
Ești norocos că nu te-a întrerupt, Iori.
And I think when Marcel has preached at my church, she didn't interrupt him. She's sweet as she can be.
Și nici pe mine, nici pe Marcel când a văzut l-a întrerupt.
But if I could be on the most important thing I'm saying that day, she just hijacks the meeting. She just stops me right in the middle of it. Sometimes I just have to keep talking.
Mesajului și ea atunci se găsește să mă oprească și răpește timpul important.
And I told her, I've got to put up my hand and said, I'll get with you in a little bit, or hold that question to the end.
Spun, știi,
Amen.
păstrează pentru puțin mai târziu întrebarea asta.
So the mantra of every discipleship meeting is that you're not in a hurry.
Mantra pentru fiecare grup de ucenicie este să nu te grăbești.
You're just not in a hurry. You can talk about anything and everything.
Nu te grăbi, poți vorbi despre orice.
I'm trying to emphasize it's not about just having a Bible study, okay?
Accentuez din nou, nu este vorba de studiu biblic cu ucenicii.
I know that if somebody else was listening to this, or if I wrote a book on this, that I'd probably be highly criticized for making a statement like that.
Sau poate că voi fi foarte criticat.
Somebody's going to say, it's always about Bible study.
Cineva ar putea zice, păi totul e legat de studiu biblic.
And I'm going to say, yeah, I agree with you, but that's not the only thing that has to happen.
Da, sunt de acord, dar nu e singurul lucru care trebuie să întâmple la grupul de ucenicie.
Right?
Așa?
That's not the only thing that has to take place in this group.
Nu e singurul lucru care trebuie să întâmple în cadrul acestui grup.
So, let's see if I want to ask you the question. You may have my notes. I don't know if yours given them to you or not, but if you have my notes, you're not allowed to give me the answer.
No, they didn't have yet.
Good. Good. I don't want you to have the notes while I'm teaching. I want you to listen. I want you to take your own notes. So in order to understand whether or not you are actually communicating
Vezi și să înțelegi ce comunici cu adevărat,
as a facilitator,
ca și facilitator,
what do you have to do? Tell me what it is that you must do. Tell me, everybody tell me. Think about it.
Gândiți-vă la asta.
That's a good answer. What did I do at the end of the last session?
Ce am făcut eu la sfârșitul sesiunii trecute? Q&A.
That's right. You have to ask questions.
Pune întrebări.
You have to get feedback.
Caută feedback.
You have to get feedback.
Caută feedback.
If you don't get feedback,
dacă nu obții feedback,
then you'll never know whether or not you're making any progress.
Nu vei ști niciodată dacă
Yes.
faci vreun progres.
Yes, Marin.
Sure. About feedback and sessioning or question and answers in a discipleship. Is there any Bible text where we see that this is happening between Jesus and his disciples? Because if I'm trying to train that to my disciples and they are going out and they are going to form their own disciples, they have to have a biblical principle and not just like that was what Maureen told us or that is what Gary told us, but something anchored in the scripture so they by their turn can also give it further on to the other disciple. So do you have an example where we see this interaction between Jesus and his disciples?
I don't have a specific example in mind. I think, you want to ask the question in Romanian?
Am întrebat dacă în Scriptură are un exemplu din Scriptură unde Domnul Iisus interacționează cu ucenicii și au o sesiune din asta de întrebări-răspunsuri și unde ucenicii dau un fel de feedback la Domnul Iisus. Pentru că dacă eu sunt un formator de ucenici, ei când vor pleca să formeze un alt grup de ucenici și vor prezenta ideea asta, eu nu vreau ca ei să spună pe asta ne-a învățat Marin sau Gary, ci ei să aibă un principiu biblic pe care să-l utilizeze și pe care să-l dea mai departe, nu ideea mea sau maniera mea de a... Și am întrebat dacă are un exemplu din Biblie pentru asta.
I don't have a specific example off the top of my head.
N-am un exemplu specific în cap.
I want to go back and repeat something that I said yesterday.
Și o să merg să
Yeah.
spun ce am
You
zis.
always start with the scriptures in the meeting.
Întotdeauna
They're
încep
the
cu
springboard.
Scriptura în cadrul întâlnirii ca fiind trambulină, rampa de
But
la...
the primary place that you want them to be taught
Și lucru primar pe care vrei tu să-l înveți
is in the church.
este în biserică.
Right? All right. That's just kind of up here at the 38,000 foot level looking down. I'm going to go to church 2-3 times a week. Somebody's going to teach me.
Mă duc la biserică de 2-3 ori pe săptămână și cineva mă învață acolo.
All right. Now I get into the discipleship group
Acum mă duc la grupul de ucenicie
and I use the scriptures as a springboard
și folosesc Scriptura ca și trambulină
to work out all the details.
ca să lucrez la detalii.
All right. But it's not, I don't see it as a Bible study
Dar nu îl privesc ca fiind un studiu biblic.
as much as I see it as, I almost don't want to say this, but as a group discussion.
Și mai mult poate ca un grup de discuții.
Where we're able to share with one another where we're not making progress.
Unde suntem în stare să discutăm unii cu alții și altfel nu progresăm.
I mean, if Jesus, let's just say Jesus meets the woman at the well.
Hai să vă zicem de Domnul Iisus cu femeia la fântână.
And his disciples come up there in John chapter 4.
Și vin în Ioan 4 ucenicii lui.
And they're confused.
Și sunt confuzi.
What are they confused about?
De ce sunt confuzi? Because he broke the tradition. He spoke with the woman and with the Samaritan.
Right. So he recognizes that there's a problem. So what does he do?
A călcat tradiția, a vorbit cu o femeie și cu o samariteancă. El își dă seama și ce face?
He addresses it.
Se adresează lor.
Right? So if you don't ask the questions,
Dacă nu pui întrebări,
I mean, he says, I want you to go feed them. And they said, well, we don't have any food. And he said, don't you remember?
Merge și hrăniți voi. Dați-le voi să mănânce. Și dar noi nu avem...
About all the baskets? When we finished the sermon, or, when we went across the lake or whatever it was?
când mergeau pe malul lacului, Mării Galilei.
He's always engaged in dialogue with them about the issues that they're having.
Totdeauna era angajat în dialog cu privire la problemele pe care le avea. Maybe in the last night or evening, or how we call, when he was with the disciple, he washed their feet and say, "Did you understand what I did for you?" And after that, he say, "You know where I'm going, and you know the way." And Thomas asked, "We don't say we don't know," or Philip said, "Show us the Father, and we will believe," and so on.
No, that's a good example. I mean, that's a good example of.
Și în seara din urmă, Domnul Iisus are multă interacțiune cu ucenicii, le spală picioarele, zice, înțelege, și am făcut. Sau când zice, știți unde mă duc și calea într-acolo, tocmai ce nu știm nici unde te duci, nici calea. Sau Filip zice, arată-ne pe Tatăl și ne va fi de ajuns.
So,
There is also an example where, Jesus said that Peter will deny Jesus. And then, there is this discussion, he insisted, Peter insisted that he will, it's impossible, he will not do that,
I'm ready to die with you.
Yeah.
Does everybody here speak English?
Toată lumea,
No, I think
yes.
Okay.
Mihai isn't anymore.
Okay. Well, if he comes back in, we'll
Okay.
switch over. We'll switch over.
Mm.
So I think to answer Marin's question, which is a great question, it's a great question, is that you still have to. We study the Bible when we have our discipleship group. This is where we start. All right. But it doesn't take us long to talk about other things. Right.
Yeah.
And there have been, Yorick wasn't there on a day where we really got into the personal issues. He just wasn't there. Every week is going to be different. But there's some weeks where we never get off the personal issues and the personal struggles that somebody may be having. Like one week, one of the brothers where we meet in his home, he was so upset because one of his sons had told him and his wife that he did not believe in God and he didn't want them to ever talk to him about God again. He was devastated. He was devastated. And so we spent almost the entire time talking about that, encouraging, building up, praying, offering wisdom, sharing testimonies about our own children and where they had failed and how God had brought them back. Right? But he wouldn't be able to do that in a church setting very well. He could do it in our men's prayer time on Wednesday night because it's kind of a small group, and I think he would feel comfortable there doing it. But we spent the whole time talking about that, or nearly the whole time talking about it. And there might be some days, I can say it this way, when somebody has a really pressing issue and we don't open the Bible up. All right? We don't. I'm not saying that's right, wrong, good, or bad. I'm just saying we don't. But I know that the men that are in that group are reading their Bible every day. I know that. I know that for a fact. I know that they are studying. I know when they're studying. because we talked about it. So the group has that flexibility, Marin. That's a little bit different. If you have to, the paradigm shift, I think, for us in this conversation is that is that the discipleship group is not church. Does that make sense? Yes or no? It's
Yes.
not church. It's a completely different format, a completely different setting that has a stronger goal toward discipleship than just meeting in the church and teaching. You want to make disciples that can make disciples. And you can't just do that in a church setting. You cannot do it in a church setting. People won't listen to you very long if that's the way that they come to church and that's the only thing you're ever talking about. Because you can't keep everybody accountable. You can't have confidentiality, right? The things that we talked about yesterday. You can't have it. You can't have it. You start talking about somebody's sexual sins in a public setting, you've destroyed somebody's life. Right? I was in shock. With how John MacArthur handled Matthew 18 in their church. With a lady that had, you can go out and watch the service on YouTube if you want to. And he does it at the end of a service. And he calls a woman out by name and she's in the service and her husband is a pastor in the church and she's been going to meet with the counselors at the churches, and my husband is abusing me. My husband is abusing our children. And they wouldn't listen to her. They said, no, he's a pastor. You've got to submit. You've got to do this. You've got to fall under his leadership. Blah, 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 blah. Finally went to court. And he got sentenced to 15 years in prison for abusing his family. 15 years in prison. He got convicted by a jury. And they're chastising this woman in public, calling her by name, kicking her out of the church when she was the one being abused. I was in shock when I saw that. I have a different perspective on Matthew 18 because the church in Matthew 18 was not like the church that it is today. It just was different. The whole setting of the church was different. It wasn't, it was different. And some of the ways that passage is handled, it doesn't sit well in a formal setting. You go by yourself, you take one or two, and you bring it before the whole church. What was the whole church?
But at that time, was the church.
To what?
At that time, didn't was the church. Because
There
the
was no
church
church.
started at Pentecost.
Right,
Can you say that Jesus settled some principle there for the church which will come later?
Right. I understand. I'm just saying that there was a lot of cultural things that had not taken place yet in the development of the New Testament church. And so that passage gets mishandled. It's like where 2 or 3 are gathered in my name, there I am in the midst of them. That's not when we meet together on Sunday. That's when you go to resolve an issue, right? That's in Matthew 18. You just take it right out of its context. But there's a cultural context, there's a historical context. And even at that, I mean, even if you're in the New Testament era after Pentecost and you have a problem at the church at Philippi or the church at Ephesus or at the church at Laodicea, who are the leaders? They didn't have church buildings like we have, right? They just didn't have it. So to me, it's more of the leaders are the ones that go. Eddie and I've had a long discussion about this. We've talked about it at length. I'm not exactly sure how he feels about it, but I feel very strongly about it. Obviously, all right. You can go out and study it on your own and decide what you want to do. But my goal is not to. I don't think the Lord's goal is to, especially in a case like what John MacArthur did. I'm surprised this lady hasn't sued them. They put this on YouTube and accused her of certain things. And it was her husband that was the problem. And they still support the husband in jail. So he got wrongly convicted. I was confused. I'm sorry I got off on that. All right, everybody, forgive me. I started. Is it okay? Is it okay for me to get excited every once in a while?
Is there any possibility that they knew something more than we know, or something which he preferred to not expose in the court?
Nope. And there's plenty of documentation to that. The problem is that they didn't want their pastors to look like they had made a mistake. They should have dealt with the pastor, but they didn't. They never listened to the wife. And the men, there were 2 men that were involved in the counseling, and that's all that they did. They kind of counseled people all the time. And as soon as the woman came in for counseling, they said, no, you got to submit to your husband. They thought marriage was hierarchical, where the man is over the woman. Nope. We are one. Man, this whole series that I did on loving your wife like Christ loved the church. It's just, there was so much that was wrong about what they were doing that I was in shock. I lost respect. I literally lost respect for John MacArthur. I have not listened to one message of him teaching since that time. I'm not saying that I wouldn't. I think he's a wonderful Bible teacher, but I was so upset by what I saw. I just thought it was wrong. Oh, I gotta be careful here, right? So, I mean, when you're going to chastise somebody publicly, is that what that passage actually means? Or there are a lot of, I don't think it does. I think that let's just say, let me just talk about it for a minute. This is not where I want to go. I want to get off of this, but I'm just going to just talk for a minute. So you went in private and they didn't accept what you had to say. So you took 2 or 3 other brothers to establish what was said, right? That's kind of what Matthew 18 says. Listen, where's the leadership in this? Where's the leadership in the church even mentioned? It's not mentioned. I mean, you just take a couple other brothers with you, and you don't, I mean, they may be young and immature, right? They may be your best friend. They may not be discerning. You've got to, and then you just go to the whole church. In my mind, what you've got to do is that you cannot do anything like that until the leadership of that church is involved in it. And you've got to come to the right decision. And they did not come to the right decision based on one thing. They were protecting the pastor, who obviously was wrong. His children testified against him. And they were protecting their counselor. You know what we call that here in America, what you call it in Romania? It's a cover-up. Right? Everybody say right. Da. No. It's a cover-up. And the whole goal of meeting with somebody is restoration. And they never, ever had a process of restoration for either the man or the woman. They just told the woman that she was wrong. And she was right. She went to them for help. Understand what I just said? She was the one that initiated the process and said, look, my husband is mistreating me and my children. He's one thing here at church and he's another thing at home. I need some help. Nope, you got to submit to your husband. You got to fall under his authority. We know what he's like here. We know he's not like that at home. Well, yes, he was. And so it just became a big cover-up. And then to publicly chastise this woman when she was there and call her by name. They did it on a Sunday night, or maybe there were less people there. But they videoed the stinking thing. They videoed it and put it on YouTube.
How they can chastise her without hearing what she has to say?
It took about 17 minutes for John MacArthur to tell everybody why they did it. And that was it. That was the only public. And you know how everybody respects him. They believe him. You know, he stands up and they believe him. And so.
But if you expose to the church, in my opinion, if you have this habit, let's say, this means that you have to ask others from the church in order to show to that guy or lady that she is wrong, because others have to say the same things which you already told her or him. Not only to taste in public.
They didn't do that because they didn't have the evidence of that. That's exactly why they didn't do that. They just did not have any evidence of that at all.
In fact, maybe a good translation is where are two or three gathering for my name. This means that they try to
Restore.
recover the name of the Lord, and they are preoccupied for the Lord, not for the people or others.
Right. Well, the issue was the husband. It wasn't the wife. He got convicted by a jury. By a jury. And so he's in jail right now for 15 years. He may get out on good behavior. But they made a terrible, terrible mistake. I don't know how I got off on that. How did I get off on that? It's 11 o'clock. It's what time is it there? 6 o'clock? I'm sorry, I didn't mean to digress. Can you tell that I'm a little passionate about that? So I hurt for the lady. I just hurt for her because I know that from everything that I read, other people that were closer to it that were discussing it, it was a terrible way of handling that. Terrible, terrible way. She was so embarrassed. The people that she came to for help threw her under the bus. Do you think she would even be going to them if that wasn't the case? You know, they just literally threw her under the bus the whole time. In the whole process of counseling, they did not hear what she had to say. And this went on for a long period of time. So I think that the husband was dishonest. And that was that's my next subject is honesty. How about that? All right, it's 11 o'clock, 7 o'clock, whatever time, 6 o'clock. I don't know. Take a 10-minute break and we'll be back. You know, I feel like I'm a radio announcer, you know, take a 10-minute break and we'll be back. And hey, now we're going. There we go. So it's hot in my room here, so I apologize. Eddie would have on a suit and a vest and, you know, it's hot here today though. So what's it like in Romania today? Is it warm, hot? Good
It is
answer.
a little bit colder than normal, but it's okay.
Okay. So the disciples. What?
70 grade Celsius.
I don't know what that is. So the discipleship group, you can discuss biblical principles all day long, but until those principles get implemented into the life of the individuals in the group, into the fabric of that disciple, nothing meaningful has happened. Right? Nothing meaningful has taken place until it gets integrated into your life. Now that's one of those principles, it's one of those areas that you have to constantly be emphasizing. You have to integrate into your life what it is that you say that you believe. And you have to know what it is that you believe. There are a lot of people that say they believe the right thing, but there's actually not much of a deep conviction about it. They may go to church, but it doesn't really mean much to them. And they may go to a church where they don't ever get taught. I wouldn't want to go to a church like that either. I want you to go to James chapter 2. James chapter 2, I'll read it to you. James chapter 2, verse 17 through 18. It says, thus also faith by itself, if it does not have works, is dead. But someone will say to me, well, you have faith and I have works. Show me your faith without your works, and I will show you my faith by my works. In other words, I'm going to tell you that I believe something, and then I'm going to prove it to you by my life. My life is going to prove to you that what I say to you is something that I truly live out. It's a conviction of mine. And I'm not, and my life is going to demonstrate that. This is absolutely critical for the health of any discipleship group. In John chapter 8 and verse 31, if you'll turn there for just a minute. John chapter 8, verse 31. Jesus called those who believed in him and were abiding in him, abiding in his word, remaining in his word, implementing his word into their life. This is what he says. He says, Jesus said to those Jews who believed him, if you abide in my word, you are my disciples indeed. Right? If, that's the key word, if you actually abide in my word, you obey my word. It's not just talking about studying the word. It's talking about obedience as much as it is about reading or even studying. I know that the word for disciple is it means to be a learner, right? We talked about that, but it's much more than just that. It doesn't do you any good to learn something that you don't implement into your life, right? Everybody see that? That ought to be obvious. Is that obvious to everybody? Right? You have to implement into your life what it is that you learn. And so those who are in the discipleship group have got to understand that week after week after week, what they are really doing, and you as the facilitator have got to be developing this mindset in them that they have to be working on those areas in their life that come out of the discipleship meetings. Whatever that may be. I don't, it might be just one thing every 2 months. I don't know. I don't really care. But whatever comes out of that meeting, everybody agrees to it. Everybody says, hey, right, this is how we want to live. This is what a real disciple is. Hold me accountable. I'm going to be honest with you if I'm actually implementing this into my life, right? Until somebody is willing to address areas of their life that need to change, they cannot grow. You can't grow. If I had one word to identify what real spiritual growth would be, it would be the word change, right? Everybody appreciate that. Growing is changing. Growing spiritually is changing. It's changing spiritually. It's maturing. It's getting better at something. It's getting wiser at something. And so it's much easier to start something than it is to sustain something. And that's the problem that the discipleship group is going to have. You can start things without sustaining those things. So I would encourage you at any point that you don't rush the development process, right? You want to be like a dog on a bone that's not going to let go of it. He's going to keep gnawing on that bone, and if you want it, he's not going to let go. Have you ever given a dog one of those big old ham bones? And they put that thing in their mouth, and they're walking around with it. They're proud. It's like they just won the lottery and got $5 million. And you try to pull that bone out of their mouth, and you can't get it out of their mouth. Well, to me, that's almost what has to happen in the discipleship group, where what we want to do, I don't think it's possible to work on 40 things at one time. That's why I think that the discipleship group, a really good discipleship group, is going to last 2 to 3 years before it begins to break up and go out and create other groups, right? So if you want to really develop this discipling culture in your church, then you have to figure out what it takes to sustain it, right? Yes, Maria.
Sir, how did you introduce discipling as a priority in your church, or as a real thing to your church?
I announced that we were going to have a discipleship group, and that we were going to meet down at a restaurant, and if you wanted to come, you could come. That was it. It was that simple. We're going to start on Saturday morning. We're going to meet at Chick-fil-A at 9 o'clock, but we're going to see how many people show up. The first week there were 3. I mean, there were just 3 of us. And then the second week there were more, and we started to grow, and then we moved to a home. And then we had we finally got settled on we had some that would come, and then they dropped out, and I didn't beg them to stay. Why did I not beg them to stay? Somebody give me the right answer. Why did I not beg them to stay?
Because
You
you were
don't need
looking for.
people undedicated.
Say that again.
You don't need people who are undedicated.
That's right. From the very beginning, they tell me that they're not going to be committed. They're not committed to what we're doing. So that's the person that you don't want in the group at that point. Maybe later, but you've got to have a strong group if you're going to bring somebody like that in. You want to just keep growing that group. I don't mean physically, in numbers. You want to grow that group spiritually, and you cannot do that in a large group setting. So every discipleship group is going to be different. It's going to have different issues. It's going to have different personalities. But the strongest personality in that group has to be the leader. You have to kind of dictate, if I can use that word. You have to we'll just say you have to control the direction, right? You are the one that has to control the direction. You're not a dictator. You just have to sustain the direction of that group. I would ask, if it was me, I would constantly be asking the group for feedback. because you as the leader may not be actually addressing the areas that they want. I remember one time, I think it was Jorrit and Marin, when we were at the House of Joy, I said, Gary, we think we can, we know how to study the Bible. We understand Romans. You taught us doctrine. We want you to talk to us. We want you to develop some courses. I asked for some feedback, and you said, we want you to give us some areas that are more practical for ministry. I changed my whole direction based on that one little discussion that we had. And I went out and I developed courses on how to study the Bible, courses on hermeneutics, courses on homiletics, courses like this. This is where I'm teaching here in the United States. This is like a 4-semester, maybe 5-semester course. I have so many areas. I have 25 areas that I want to cover. We're on study 7. We probably have studied loving your wife, and that's another one. So we're probably further along than that. But I mean, this is about as practical as it gets. In fact, I've had some of my students here in the United States tell me that this course on non-negotiables has been the most valuable course that they've ever taken, which I thought was a little bit of a surprise. I thought it would be how to study the Bible or something, but I mean, we've gone over so many statistics that are just mind-boggling to me. They're just mind-boggling. And those statistics have just frightened people from even to reconsider whether or not they even want to go into the ministry. I keep telling my students, and you may have been there one night when we were going over some statistics. I don't remember, that if you don't listen to the statistics, you're a fool. You're naive. You're naive if you don't listen to how many pastors are dropping out. In the United States, for instance, just in the United States, the statistics prove that over 50%, or right at 50%, of men that go and get a seminary education drop out of the ministry within 5 years. 5 years. Now, if you want to go out, if you want to go to Liberty, or you want to go to Southwestern, or Reformed Theological Seminary, wherever it is, and you want to spend $90,000, $100,000 for a 3-year education, and then get out and leave the ministry, you better think about that. I want to say this from my benefit. You men are fortunate. The diploma that you get doesn't cost you anything. There's no cost here. And I hope that the teaching and the education that you're receiving is that you would consider it to be good, that you would consider it to be excellent. Not just me, but the other men.
Definitely, sir.
Huh?
I said definitely.
I've sat. I mean, I've been to the seminary, and I had the worst classes that you could possibly have. It insulted me. The classes insulted my intelligence. Church administration, how to fill out a Sunday school report. Come on. I'm an architect. I'm a professional. I handle math really well. I can figure out how many people showed up at Sunday school. I had a course on pastoral counseling. I've told you this many times. And the guy was a research student. He was a research student. and for one of the professors, and he was doing his doctoral paper on Erich Hamburger Erickson, who was the protege of Sigmund Freud. And I sat in a Freudian psychology class for an entire semester. I wasted every penny that I put into that, every dime of me sitting in that class and listening to the nonsense that this man was teaching was mind-boggling to me. It discouraged me so bad. I had Greek for 2 years. I mean, I've got the guy's book up here, where it's right up here somewhere. That he was my professor. I didn't learn a thing. I didn't learn a thing because all he wanted me to do was to memorize the endings. It was so impractical. I'm not going to have a Greek conversation with anybody. Right? I had a guy come in from Columbia Bible College at the time, and he taught an 8-hour course on Greek, and I learned more in 8 hours than I did in 2 years, 4 semesters of Greek with a Greek scholar. He taught Greek at Columbia Bible College. He had figured out what the student actually needed for his ministry. I'm not going to be a Hebrew scholar. Marcel, you're probably the Greek scholar among us. You know, you're the one that probably knows. I'm sure you know more than I do. But if I find an answer to something, I have the what? Somebody tell me, what do I have that I can use? I have the tools. I have the tools that I can use to go learn. So as a leader, you've got to be asking for feedback. You never want, as the facilitator, you never want to get to a place where you have all of the answers. Now, you can ask me questions, and I'm going to give you the best answer I can, but I can assure you that they may not always be the best answer. I may not have a great answer all the time. Listen, just remember how different the disciples were when they first met the Lord Jesus. Compare that to what they were like after the day of Pentecost. You know, when and what happened in their life after the Lord had ascended. They grew, right? They were growing. They had problems all along the way. They were scared to death that they were going to die out in the Sea of Galilee. You know, Lord, we're going to die, or we can't catch anything. We'll just throw your net on the other side. You know, I mean, Jesus was different. But you cannot be threatened by the input of the people in your group. You just can't be threatened by it. As a pastor, I constantly need the input of my elders. I want the input of my associate pastor, especially. I want it because he is immature in his ministry. He hasn't been in the ministry for long. And so I'm sort of his mentor, but I want his input. And it was kind of interesting to me. And then I want input of my congregation as well. And, but one week, it was probably a month and a half ago. In the same week, my associate pastor came to me, and one of the elders in my church came to me. And they said, Gary, we think that the length of the teaching on Sunday morning is too long. Right? If you watch the videos of what I may be teaching, There was one service I had where I talked for 2 hours and 15 minutes, and I'm sure if somebody opens that up on Facebook, that they're not going to watch it. They're just not going to watch it. You know, Eddie says, you know, this can't handle what that can't handle. So we had some visitors that Sunday morning. They never came back. You know, it was the only time that I teach my church is on Sunday morning. The other men, 2 of the elders teach, and then we have the discipleship group, and I don't even lead that, and I don't even lead the prayer group. So we have the teaching on Sunday night, we have the prayer group on Wednesday night, we have the discipleship group on Saturday. I teach on Sunday morning, that's it. My associate pastor actually probably teaches more than I do. And so that's the only time I get with my church, and I'm not willing to give them a sermonette, right? But I made a decision. I made a conscious decision after I listened to both of them. They said it's counterproductive if you go too long, that people cannot listen to you that long without a break. Now, I teach on Tuesday night, the day that we didn't have class, I taught for 4 hours that night. We take a break every 2 hours. My students are used to it. It's a normal class. Here, we take a break every hour, right? The seats that you're sitting in right now, they're comfortable. You can go get something to eat. You can get something to drink. Marin's going to go get some more grapes. Hallelujah. Now we're talking. And hey, by the way, my wife has grapes and strawberries and apples cut up in a bowl for me when I go out there to get something to eat. That's called the Marin influence, right? That's the influence there. So I can't be threatened by their input. So what did I do? Rather than having 6 pages of notes, I decided I was going to go to 4 pages of notes. It takes me about 15 minutes to preach through a page. The first day we had class here, I got to a page in 3/4, maybe, in nearly 4 hours. So I can do that in the pulpit as well. Why? Because it's the only time I get with my church. But I made the adjustment, right? I listened to the people that I trust, those that surround me, right? You have to do that. You cannot be a good leader. You cannot be a good facilitator if you don't listen to what the men in your group believe are issues. Everybody hear what I just said? If you're not a good listener, you're not going to have a good group. You have to let them help you to make adjustments all along the way. So I think that feedback, if I can say it this way, and then we'll take a 10-minute break. I believe that feedback is the greatest tool that you as a facilitator have for spiritual growth within the group. Feedback. I always want your feedback. I want to know if you're even getting anything out of this topic. I think this is critical. I think of all of the messages that all of the different studies that we're going to have, that the most critical one is to love your wife like Christ loved the church. But this being a disciple that makes disciples has got to be, it's got to be number 2 or number 3. It's got to be up there. and we've got to figure out how to be able to do it. So feedback for me is critical. So if I ask you, I said, you guys, I'm not asking you to pat me on the back, all right? I'm not asking you to do that. I'm asking you to tell me, nah, I'm not getting much out of this. I think that's what Yorick and Marin were telling me. We want something practical. This is as practical as it gets. I mean, this is as practical as it gets. Leading with confidence, being obedient, created in God's image, not lording over your flock, loving your wife. I don't think I can be more practical than this. So, okay, any questions or comments before we take our break?
I think it's really important, sir, that what you are teaching and what you are offering is backed up by your own life and own testimony. So it gives more value and more worth to it because you're also truly living it. When I read a book, I don't know what the other guy's life is, but when I hear your testimony, when I see things you're doing, when I hear the lives you change and the work you're doing, I can appreciate it. And I think my colleagues also. So it's not just learning process, it's really seeing it. And I think that's very important in the discipleship group because there were many people who heard Jesus, but a few of them also saw him living it out. And I think that impacted them also. And that's what we see also by you. So thank you for that.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. I need the encouragement. So I'm fighting a lot of things, guys. I'm fighting heart failure. I'm fighting cancer. And I'm fighting it for my family. Right? I have pulmonary fibrosis that affects my breathing. I don't sleep well. But I want the last years of my life. I don't know how many I have. I want them to mean something.
Yeah.
I want them to mean something. Not just to me, but to other people. I want to leave a legacy to my family. Not to be afraid of the future. Not to be just complaining all the time. Not to be afraid. That I have somebody that's walking this with me. And developing these studies with me is just, it's the joy of my life. To sit down and to buy books and to read and to study and to prepare. And I want what's in my heart. I want it to come out. I don't know how many more, I don't know how long I have with you. Most all of you have graduated. I don't know how many, I don't know if we have anybody here. You know, so the question is this is going to be a group? I'll give you credit for attending. If you want a doctorate degree, we'll put this toward a doctorate degree. But I love you, man. I appreciate your feedback, and I thank you for the encouragement. I thank you for it.
We thank you. We appreciate your effort to pour out your life in ours.
Thank you. Y'all are worth the effort. Trust me. Trust me. I still need some Romanian soup. If you can bottle it up and put it in a bottle and send it to me, I would appreciate it. 246 Bearwood Road, Windsor, South Carolina. So
Biden will be jealous, sir.
Huh? What'd you say?
Biden will be jealous.
Yeah, he would be. He would be very jealous. Oh, he's a mess. Golly. All right, guys, let's take a 10-minute break. It's 5:07. We'll come back at 7:15. All right. All right. No problem. I'll put a note on the bottom of my thing here, record, but I wouldn't even see it. So it's okay. It says clean barn for car. Let's see, record. So I'll be right there. So it's important that you constantly are getting feedback and letting the group make the decisions as much as you're making the decisions, so that they can see how you kind of handled that. If you feel like you have to maintain control of everything that goes on in the group, I don't think your group will ever be successful. I just don't think your group will ever be successful. I don't know where my health is going to take me, right? But when I leave, I want the men that are in that group to be able to move forward and to have their own discipleship groups, right? So I have to make sure that I'm not taking all the responsibility. What I want to do, what the goal is to get out of the way, is to train people to take my place, whether it's a pastor, facilitator in a discipleship group, whatever it may be, to train people to literally take my place. Now, here's what has to happen. I want to say this in kind of a big way, and then we'll discuss it. Failure has to be expected.
Mm-hmm.
Failure has to be expected. You need to be prepared for failure. And there are different levels of failure that can happen in the group. What you don't want to happen is for somebody to just never accept accountability, responsibility. They are going to be a deterrent to the group, and they will be the ones, I'm going to tell you the truth, they will be the ones that will violate your confidentiality that has to take place in the group, right? They're the ones that will ultimately go out, well, I didn't really enjoy the group, you know, they talked about this, they talked about that, and the next thing you know, what we talk about, unless it's just theological, I don't want it to leave the room. I don't know what the Romanian culture is like. I mean, I do know what it's like, but I don't know how it's different than what I'm talking about. But
It's even worse.
it's even worse. Okay. Well, you know, Paul told Timothy, I want you to go find faithful men. You know, he talked to him about this, about going out and finding faithful men that he could commit the teaching to. So that has a little bit to do with it at the beginning. I think I'm not really settled on this, but if all you do is go out and get new believers, that's probably not going to work well in the long run. If you go out and get new believers to come into the group, you've got to have a mixture of older, mature men with the younger believers. Let me put it that way. You know, they may be old men, but they might be young as believers. So I think the lesson for me is that God has always taught me more through my failure than through my success. So if that's a conviction of mine, and I really believe that, and I really live that out, then in reality, I'm okay with your failure. All right. I'm okay with that failure up to a point that it doesn't interrupt the group. Right. Understand what I'm saying, or what I'm trying to say. Let's say somebody's not faithful. There comes a point where that becomes counterproductive to what the discipleship group is doing, especially if it's a small group. You're kind of expecting people to be there, they're not there. You encourage them to come, they don't come. You just have to sit down and have a talk and say, look, why don't we'll start some more discipleship groups later, and if you feel like you want to fit in, then you can do that. You know, just find a gracious way to sort of help them get out of that place. So let's talk about it this way. If you expect failure, right? If you expect it, if you know that it's going to happen, whether it's in your church or whether you're a teacher in a classroom or whatever it may be, if you literally expect failure to happen because it's normal, then you can use that for your advantage, right? Understand what I just said? You can use it for your advantage because you know it's going to happen, so you can be prepared. We have one brother. We have one brother that was literally, I mean, he's a handful. I mean, I'm just telling you, he's a handful. He's got a personality quirk. He's a sweet brother. I love him to death. I'd do anything for him. He's 50 some years old, and he just got out of the hospital this morning because he was cutting up on a four-wheeler, turned over. You know, they took him to the hospital. He stayed there. He was in the emergency room last night until 6 o'clock in the morning, figuring out if he's got broken bones. He was having trouble breathing. They didn't know if he had punctured his lungs, you know, and I'm thinking, I don't care if you want to ride a four-wheeler, but I don't have time. I just don't have time to be doing all of that, you know? And he's one of the brothers that just decided he wasn't going to come anymore. So as a facilitator, you have to let your guard down. You have to share your failures. You have to show how God has strengthened you when you failed, when you weren't a good husband, right? When you mistreated your children, when you made bad decisions. I've shared with my church the worst decisions I've ever made in my life. I've shared them with them in a public setting about the ministry decisions that I made that were just awful, just terrible, sick. I was young, I was impetuous, I was arrogant, I was impatient, but I learned from it. God disciplined me for about 12 years because of it. And I learned my lesson, and now I've used that lesson for my benefit, right? So I can share with people what happened. I shared with a brother not long ago. He called me and he wanted to ask me some questions, and I said, brother, I want to share with you. I think you're headed down the same road that I was. He's one of my students. He's a younger brother. He's got this burn. He's just got to teach. He's got to just teach. He just feels like he's a teacher. He's got to teach. And he's not a pastor. He's a wannabe pastor. He doesn't have a pastoral heart yet. He just doesn't have it. But he wants to stand in front of people and just teach. And I kind of had that same burn in my own life. And so I had a long talk with him. I mean, I had a long talk with him. I mean, we talked for about an hour about where I failed and where I said, brother, you're headed down the same road that I was. And you may not believe me now, but I can assure you that if you don't change, you're so far ahead of God that you're not going to be where God wants you. And you're going to get so disappointed in the church that you choose, and you're not going to know how to handle the problems. And next thing you know, you're going to be this statistic that we've been talking about the whole time, and you're going to leave. Yes.
Sure. I assume that this brother maybe was taking in consideration the advice that you were giving him. But what would you do if in a group, in a disciple group where he's very intimate and confident, if a brother confess a failure in his life and other brothers will not accept it because they think they're more holy, or I don't know, but they just don't accept it, how will you deal with that situation? When a brother is doing something it's really stupid, or he's just not paying attention, and other brothers are just hardened towards him. So how will you reconcile that situation?
I think for me, that's an easy question to answer. Whether or not it's an easy question to implement is a different thing. Okay. But I'm going to tell you how I answered. And I think I talk about it a little bit later in the study. We may not even get to it this week, but I think when you start the group, you have to create parameters. You have to create some, I call them rules. Okay. We just say rules. And one of the rules is that if we are going to open up with one another, if we're going to create that kind of environment, then when a brother shares with us something that is difficult for us to understand how he could be doing that, or whatever it may be, I mean, we whatever it may be, in any issue, that we're not there to chastise him. We're there to support him, right? So for me, we talked about that in the beginning. In fact, I've talked about it many times in the discipleship group. And one of the reasons that I talk about it is so that we can open up, so that everybody that's in the group has a confidence that, hey, if I share this with these men, that they're not going to beat me with a stick. They're not going to get mad at me. They're going to understand that I'm struggling. I want to become a leader, and I'm struggling in this area of my life. And I just think it's one of those, we would say it was a foundational kind of principle that you, as the leader of that group in the beginning, have to reinforce probably a good number of times before you can really make. But before people are really going, you're not going to start the group and then in 2 weeks people are going to just start opening up. That's not going to happen. It's not going to happen. So in that interim period between the time that you start and the time that happens, honestly, it could be 6 months. It could be a year. I mean, just based on the makeup of that group. I'm very fortunate that the most of the men in my group are mature believers. They love the Lord. They love their wives. They love their church. They love me. They love the discipleship group. So they trust one another. I'm fortunate. All right. But I don't want to be in that group forever. I want to be out of that group and start another group. And this time I'm going to do it differently. All right. I'm going to start it and lead it and then I'm going to keep passing the responsibility on to somebody else. All right. So for me, Marin, the answer to your question is that you have to facilitate that at the beginning and create that culture. You have to talk about it. You have to talk about it. You have to talk about it. You have to talk about it until you feel like it's embedded. How will you know if it's actually been embedded in the group? How will you know?
If people just open up, talk, and
That's right. That's right. That's exactly right. People will begin to open up, and they won't feel threatened, because there won't be any threatening remarks made. People will stop. We'll begin to pray. We'll text people during the week. I'm praying for you, brother. You got this. You can make this. You can do this. All those kind of things that are kind of easy to do. I think that the disciples that you're making will admire. Let me say it this way. Let's say that you're the alpha dog in the group. Okay, you're the mature believer in the group. You may be a pastor. I would say if Cornell or Marcel were leading a group, that because they're the pastors of the men, that everybody's kind of looking to them for direction and for the input, right? But you don't want the input to just come from you all the time. You want the input to come from one another and the lessons that you've learned. So I think that everybody in the group, if you're the facilitator and a strong leader, that they are going to appreciate that. They're going to tell you that, but they really are going, if I can say it this way, is that what's the right word? They are going to connect with you more through your failure and your shortcomings. Right? So that's why in my group, I'm not afraid to share with my group any failure that I made. And that's why these two men weren't afraid to come to me in private and say, Gary, we think the service that you're teaching too long in a service. People just can't sit there for 2.5 hours, 2 hours, 15 minutes, or 2 hours with this hard back bench and stuff. And it was just as effective when you talk for 1 hour and 15 minutes. And I didn't, it was like, I think I appreciated it, and I've communicated that to them. I've communicated that to my church. I said, I apologized to my church. I said, look, these men, one of the elders and my associate pastor that came to me, they said that, and everybody's kind of shaking their head. Yep. It's like I had the blind spot, and I just didn't want to, I just wanted to teach. That's what I do. That's what you do, right?
Yes, sir.
Right? That's what you men do. That's what you want to do. That's what you're being called to do. So if you only get one chance a week, 20 minutes is not going to handle it. It's not going to do it for me. An hour is just hard for me. I mean, we have this session here and for 50 minutes, and it's over before I get started. I'm on page 7. This is our 3rd day. Right? I missed a day, right? I'm on page 7. I'm not in a hurry. Just not in a hurry. So I think the man who only teaches about his success will never be much of a teacher. I think that's the best way to say it. So here's what you want to do. Here's what you want to happen. Let me say it in this way. It's okay to be vulnerable in a small group. It's not a bad thing. It's okay to be vulnerable in a small group. I would say that you do not, especially as a spiritual leader in your church, want to become vulnerable in a large setting. There's too much unnecessary criticism and dispute and anger that can happen. I want to give you an illustration of that, okay? I just want to give you an illustration. We have a good friend that Yorit and I pray with. His name is Scott Davis. And Scott is a wonderful pastor. He's actually on the board of trustees for Covington. And he was before he actually became a pastor, he was an entrepreneur. A very, very successful entrepreneur. He had a business where they would go out and they would tear down buildings. This may not seem like it has anything to do with making disciples, but it has a lot to do with being vulnerable and what can happen. And so he had a business where they went and they tore old mills down, and they would get all the materials out of those mills. They were made of brick. They mostly were made of pine, heart pine. I mean, we're talking about huge beams that were made out of a pine tree. And they would go, and I mean, it was quite a job. They would have to X-ray the wood before they put these diamond cutters on them, and it just kept expanding, and they kept doing more. And they became the world's largest supplier, of exotic woods. All right. And then he felt like the Lord called him into ministry. And he became a church planner. And he joined this church. He created. I guess he took a church that was dying. He planted several churches, and then he took a church that was dying, and he joined that church with another church that was dying, the two of them, and now they're a vibrant church. Right, really great guy, great leader, wonderful brother. He gets called by a huge company that made him an offer that they wanted him to be the president and the CEO of one of their companies. They had multiple companies. All the guys that owned the company were Christians. They send evangelistic teams out all over the world. They support it financially. And so they wanted him to become the president and CEO of a company at an enormous salary. All the benefits, vehicles, insurance, retirement, everything. And so he shared it with his elders and his pastoral staff. He turned the job down twice. And the company was not happy with that. They wanted him to come on. They wanted him to be their president and CEO of this company. So they flew him up to Detroit, Michigan, for 2 days. They went through all the process of the interviewing and talking and showing him, and it was really, really a very, very, he was struggling. He was struggling. He wanted us in our group, our little prayer group, to pray for him, which we did. And but one of the men in the elders, it was actually the associate pastor, did not keep this in confidential. And he went home and told his wife. And the next thing you know, his wife is angry and mad about the fact that he's even considering to do this. And the reason that she got angry is because she got her expectation up, is that they thought that he was going to take the job. And when he didn't take the job, I mean, she was angry to begin with, but that she was sure that her husband was going, as the associate pastor, was going to take over that church. It's a nice church, nice facilities, good congregation, a lot of really good things. And the husband broke confidentiality. So this lady goes into the church and stirs the pot, right? Stirs the pot. Now everybody thinks that he's leaving. He's already told these people twice that he doesn't want the job. But the offer was so large that he says, Gary, I just have to at least listen. Maybe this is something God really wants me to do for my family. And I told him that I would support him, whichever decision he made. I could have told him, here's what I could have told him. I could say, well, brother, don't you know that the gifts and calling of God are irrevocable? I didn't do that. Why? Because I was his brother and I knew that he was struggling, and I wasn't going to use the scriptures as a weapon against him. I wasn't going to do that. I told him that he called me. I'm the one that he called first and shared with me what was going on. And so in the end, he came back, and he basically told him while he was up there that he was not going to take the job. And you know what he gets paid as a pastor without a lot of benefits and without it means that his wife has to work, and she wouldn't have had to work. And they have she has some physical issues. She was in a car wreck and she got hurt. She got hurt really bad. They had to fuse her spinal cord together. She's lucky she's not paralyzed. She's in pain all the time. And they don't have the kind of insurance that actually pays for that. So she works in pain and he works, and it's a really, really struggle for them sometimes to make it financially. I admire him. I'm just telling you, I admire the guy. And he came back and he called me and he said, Gary, he said, I wanted you to know that I did not take the job. I have perfect peace about it. God called me to be a pastor. That's what I'm going to be for the rest of my life. So the lady got really angry about all of this. So they have a meeting. Now she's the associate pastor's wife. They have a meeting. He said, well, look, we can meet, we can talk about it. So they have a meeting, and it's almost time here. They have a meeting just to kind of get reconciled, and the meeting doesn't go well. She's still angry. She's still mad. She leaves the church and says she's never coming back. Where does that leave her husband? He's the associate pastor. He's staying on, and now his wife is not there. This is terrible. This is terrible. There was just, he made himself vulnerable, right? And somebody violated that confidentiality. And one lady starts gossiping, bringing other people into the discussion. And I don't know all the details. I don't want to know the details. I haven't asked to know the details. I'm not going to seek out the details. I love my brother. He did the right thing. He had to figure out what he had to do to help his family. And he chose the ministry that God had called him into over a secular job that even had a bunch of Christians that were running it. They wanted him because he was a Christian. They knew what he's a tour guide for Asia Minor, for Israel. You know, I mean, he's just quite a person. I didn't know if you knew that, Yuri, but he's just a wonderful brother. So you have to be a little bit careful, men. You have to be a little bit careful when you do make yourself vulnerable. If you make yourself vulnerable, you have to, especially in the beginning, you have to let everybody know this doesn't go out of this room. You don't tell your wife. If you don't mind the wife knowing, that's okay. But the problem with that is that if you tell all the wives, they don't have the same commitment to the group that you do. Everybody understand? They may be wonderful people. They are. They may be, and you might tell them, you know, don't say anything to anybody, and somehow in a conversation, the word leaks out. Next thing you know, you're dead meat. You're a possum on the road. You got hit by the car. So you have to be a little bit careful. The word that I like to use, all right, and maybe this is a better word than vulnerable, is that you have to be transparent, right? You have to be transparent with how you with how you lead the group, with how you manage the problems that are there. I do not want to be hiding things from the people in my group that I am discipling. I don't want to hide things. I want to be one of them, right? I don't want to be above them. I want to be one of them. I want to be the example. And so I want them to know that I'm no different than they are when it comes to being a disciple maker. And I think for a lot of guys that are leaders, that are pastors, This is a really, really difficult thing to become vulnerable, transparent, because you want people to see you and to think about you as, this is the pastor, you know, and he doesn't have any problems. Sure you do. Sure you do. You have problems with people. You have problems with people in your church. You may not be a pastor. You may be here and in this group here, and you have problems with your pastor. You know, you have to be a little careful about being, vulnerable. But you have to know, you have to let the people that you're discipling, you have to let them know when you have failed. In one of the strategic areas that you may be discussing or that you may be developing. So you have to be their what? You have to be their model for transparency. Let me say it this way, and then we'll stop and we'll take our final break here. You have to let them know. Here's what you have to let them know. You have to let them know that you are still very much a learner, right? And that you are willing to learn from them. You're a learner. You're still a learner. I'm a learner. I'm studying every day. My desk is so junky. I don't even know where stuff is anymore. I got books and I got notes and I got all kinds of stuff here on my desk. I don't even know. My wife put stuff on the desk and I don't even know what to do with it. But I'm reading and I'm learning and I don't want to stop. And so if you let them know that you're still very much a learner and that you deeply value learning from them, I learned from my elder, my associate pastor, that I was teaching too long, right? They didn't say that because they thought that it was just boring. They thought it was counterproductive. They thought it was hurting me for other people that maybe don't even go to our church and listen on YouTube or listen on whatever it may be, the website or Facebook. So here's the principle. Write this down. You want to be the kind of leader that you would want to follow. Right? You want to be the kind of leader that you want to follow. And that's such good advice that it actually goes without saying. Okay, any questions? We need to take a break. We need to take our last break. These days are going by really fast for me. I don't know if they're going by fast for you or not. But just flying by here. We've been doing this for 4 hours now. So.
Sir, I have a small question, but
Yes,
not necessary to answer right now. Maybe a little bit later. Now it's break. Yeah.
Okay, we can have it right at the beginning of the next break. Okay. Okay.
Good.
All right. I gotta go get some more grapes. I looked up the word disciple, and it's only used 29 times in the New Testament, which I thought, I don't know if that's a lot or not a lot, but it carries with it a great deal of implications. So I want to give you, I want you to look through this with me at the 4 verses that are the primary foundation for what I would consider, these are the verses that are the primary teaching in the New Testament on what it means to be or to become a disciple. All right. These are very demanding, very kind of exacting verses. The other verses would talk about, well, Jesus went somewhere with his disciples, right? But these are the 4. I would have thought that there would have been more, but there's 4. You can go out and look at all 29 of them yourself. Just get on your computer, type in the word disciple on whatever program you've got. But you can tell that these are the 4. All right, let's go through them. Matthew chapter 28, we know that one, but let's go there anyway. Matthew 28, verse 18 through 20. Jesus came and spoke to them, saying, all authority has been given to me in heaven and on earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all the nations, baptizing them in the name of the Father and of the Son and of the Holy Spirit, teaching them to observe all things that I've commanded you. And lo, I am with you always, even to the end of the age. So that's the one that everybody probably quotes the most. Just go make disciples, right? Be a disciple maker. Sippy, don't forget your question. I'll get to the end of this little section here real quick, and then I'll stop, and you can and you can ask your question. I forgot that. Do that. Go to Luke. The next 3 are in the book of Luke. Luke chapter 6, verse 40. Luke chapter 6, verse 40. Talking about this is really this is Luke's version of the Beatitudes, of the Sermon on the Mount, if you want to call it that. And he says in verse 40, a disciple is not above his teacher, but everyone who is perfectly trained will be like his teacher. So if I can say it this way, a disciple has to have somebody that's discipling him, right? Everybody understand what that verse is saying?
Mm-hmm.
You don't just get into a group without somebody that's providing direction for the group, right? That's why it has to be small in my mind. The second is in Luke chapter 14, verse 26 and 27. This is probably the verse that is the most demanding. I don't even know how to handle it sometimes. I know what it says. I think I know what it means. Emotionally, I don't know how to teach it because I feel like kind of a failure, right? But it says, if anyone comes to me and does not hate his father and mother, wife and children, brothers and sisters, yes, in his own life, also, he cannot be.
What reference? What
My-
reference?
Huh?
What reference is the
Luke 14, 26, 27. He cannot be my disciple. And whoever does not bear his cross and come after me cannot be my disciple. There's a lot in that verse. It's just, you know, that's a course, right? That's a verse, that's a course, or 2 verses. And then in verse 33 of that same chapter, after he's kind of talked about all of this and counting the cost and going out to war and building a tower and all that kind of stuff, he says, so likewise, whoever of you does not forsake all that he has cannot be my disciple. Golly, those are convicting words, right? If you don't think those are convicting words, I wouldn't know what to say to you. Those are incredibly convicting words. I'm just saying to you that those are the primary words, verses for discipleship in the New Testament. All right, those four. You can go out and do the research yourself, but just trust me. Sippy, did you have something you wanted to ask?
Yes, thank you. You have said at the beginning that you read a book in 2 hours or in 2 days, or 2 books in 2 days. Just let us know how could be possible, how is this speed reading? You read just the first sentence and the last from the page, or you get the ideas from the beginning? I don't know. Just let us know how you can read so quickly and also to take benefit from the book. I would like to do like this, but honestly I cannot. No, I think it takes for me maybe weeks to finish a book.
I just read fast, and I don't just read the first sentence or the last sentence. But there are a lot of books that I'm reading. I know that some of these say if I read a book like this right here, No Easy Jesus, I can just look at it right now and know that this guy is telling a lot of stories. All right. I mean, I don't know what the book's going to be like when I buy it. And if I know that it's telling a lot of stories, I can figure out what he's saying before he ever gets to the end. So I don't just spend a lot of time I don't feel like I have to read every word, every sentence. I look at it. I look at every page. I mean, I look at every page. I'm scanning every page. And I'm literally passing over things that I don't think are really critical for me to understand, that I already know what he's going to say. If I'm in a really technical book, if I've got some of these technical manuals up here, if I've got something by who would be a good person, there's some of these, what's the guy's name that's so difficult to read? I couldn't read a book of his in 6 weeks because I can't understand what he's saying. He's so difficult to read. John Owens is really difficult for me to read. He's an old Puritan pastor. He's full of wisdom, but he's very difficult to read. And I can't read the same way. So every book is different, but if I'm reading, I just roll through it. That's all I can tell you. I'm disciplined enough to know that I don't have to know every word. I don't have to read every word to get something out of the book. And here's what I do. Let me see if I can find it for you. Let's see if I can find it for you. I may have shown you this. After I read the book, I've marked the book up. I've marked it up. And so what I do, this is called not lording over your flock. All right. This is one of the studies. All right. This is just one of them. And you can see what's in yellow. And this was there's a book I have called, I don't even know where it is. It's called The Bully Pulpit. The Bully Pulpit. And when I developed that study, even though I highlighted stuff here out of this book, I didn't, and I just have pages of, I go through, I was going to show you what I'd highlighted in the book. So I go back through the book and then I write down what the notes that I liked from that book. I go through each chapter again, I write it down. I just keep writing it down. For instance, this is the next book is I'm doing one on encouraging words, and I'll show you this. This is encouraging words. All right, that's the series that I'm developing at church. So I'm reading different books, and at the end of it, at the end of a page, I'll put, this is a book that I'm reading by Lamport. Of the 6, 7, or 8 books that I have on encouragement, I just write it down there, and I may use part of it. I may not use everything. You can see what I haven't used yet, and so just here it is. So I try to pick out what's really pertinent for me. Some stuff. I mean, I've been a Christian for 51 years, and it's not like I feel like I'm going to find something new in every book. Right? Right? Marcel, how long have you been a Christian?
Let's count.
You lost
Starting
count?
from 84. 1984.
All right. I got saved in what, 71. So I've been a Christian for a long time, and so there's a lot of information there that even if they give it to me, I want it to stimulate me to think, but I don't feel like I have to. I spend more time marking up in the book, a really good book, than I actually do reading it probably. And then I go back and put it in that notebook. And then that's, I put the book down and I pull out my notes. I pull out this for those books that I'm using. And that's what I teach from. I mean, that's the way I develop my messages. I would say that I would say say it this way, okay?
39 years ago.
Okay. So you ought to be like kind of where I am, that you already know what a topic is about. When I develop it, let's say for instance, I'm reading a book, Sippy, and I think a guy's got a really good idea in that book. I mean, I think it's really good. I like it. I write that idea down. I don't copy it word for word. I just sort of write the idea and the gist of what I think he's trying to say. And then I can take that one idea and I can write about it for a good while. I can write 1, 2, 3 pages from that one idea. That's why it takes me so long to get through a series, because there's just so much. I've read so much. There's so many good ideas. I've written them down, and it just it's just easy for me to. I feel like I'm wasting time if I read if I read every sentence of every book. I feel like I'm wasting my time.
I prefer to mark on the book, which
That's what I do. That's exactly what I do. I was going to find a good book.
Apropo, o carte bună. Acum 2 zile am terminat-o. Legea lui Hristos.
I was looking for a specific book, but I don't know where I put it. But I'm marking the books up. I make notes on them when I'm reading, and that's what slows me down, actually. I would say on a book like any of these right here, say Awakening to God, It's got 153 pages. If it takes me over 2.5, 3 hours to read that, I feel like I've wasted my time. But it'd take me two hours to go back through it if it was really good. Write everything back down, put it in my own words, and put it on paper. So, just kind of what the goal is, I think. Everything in every book's not that important, and you got to figure out what that is. Let me just say this. I think it's a good question, because I think the more that you read, the better of a teacher that you become. Sometimes when I get up in the pulpit, I've read so much on a subject that there's no way I can put all of that into my notes and get out of the service at a reasonable time, you know? And that's what my guys were complaining about a little bit. But the more you read, you develop what I call a residual knowledge. It just builds up, right? It's just residual information that you have. It's there. Your brain is filing it at night into some file for you. And whether or not you remember it, or even whether or not you highlighted it or underlined it or whatever, it's kind of there. You get the big picture, and you can talk about that. If you're a good teacher, you can take a simple statement and you can roll on that statement. That's what I have in like the next note here is called, what about evangelism? All right. So somewhere along the way in studying for making disciples, and I've got a group of books over there. Let me see how many I got in my. We're not even gonna get close to getting through. I've got 1, 2, just say books that I read or stuff off the internet. So I got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I've got 7 books in my bibliography for this study here. But I've read a lot more that's not here, right? Because I didn't use that material. I read the book, but I didn't take anything out of it that I really wanted to use. So I may have used 10 books, 12 books for discipleship. And so I got this residual knowledge that just builds up. It just builds up. It just builds up. It builds up. And I think that's kind of what you work from. I think that's how you ought to do it. So I would encourage you to force yourself to read fast. I would, if let's just say, for instance, that today after this study, it'd be 2 o'clock my time. I could sit down and read one of those books before 5 o'clock with no problem. I might could read 1.5 of them if I took one of the smaller ones. It's just not a problem, because I'm not trying to read every sentence. Every sentence it's not telling me something. The guy's telling the story. You can almost go to the end of the story and know what the point was. And some of these guys in these books that they write today, they're not very technical. They don't use a lot of scriptures, and they're telling a lot of stories, and that's how they sort of keep your interest in it. And I don't have nearly as much interest in the stories as I have in the principles. So I don't know if that helps or hurts.
Thank you, sir. Thank you.
Do you guys read fast? Any other guys read fast like that? Is that a yes or no?
No.
Is that a no or a yes or no? I couldn't tell.
I had to read the commentary on Matthew and 2 Corinthians for Brother Eddie, and it's, for me, that's like very difficult to read. I can only read like 15 pages an hour, so it's really difficult for me to go through the books, and they're like almost 500 pages. So I'm thinking it will take me an eternity to read all the stuff. But you just have to go through it, because we have to write how do you say that?
2 essays.
Yeah, essays. Yeah, but it's about the book.
Book review.
Book review.
Book review. Yeah. So I just cannot skip the pages. Or I have to read this to understand it.
Have you ever heard my story about book reviews?
No.
Huh? I've never told you my story.
No, but I didn't remember.
I'm going to tell you my story about book reviews. I have a lot of times here in the United States. I have the students do a book review of the books, but I'm not going to use 500-page books. If I do that, that's going to be a 2 or 3 semester course. All right, I just don't. I'm just not going to do that. Now, he may do that, but I'm not going to do that. I'm not saying that's right. I'm not saying it's wrong. So I had a class in Aiken of about, it was probably 15, 16 students that I had in this class. And so I had them to do a book review. Now, I have something on my computer that's a plagiarism program, right? All I have to do is to go in. If I think something's plagiarized, I can go in and type the sentence in, and it will take me to the book or a book where that came from. Because I already know how my students write. Some of them are good and some of them are really, really bad. So if one of my really bad writers gives me a really good essay, it's a red flag for me. I'm waving the red flag here. There's something wrong here. So anyway, I had him write a book review on a book. I don't know what it was. And so I was grading the papers, and I just knew, I'm just telling you, I just knew that this book, that this review that they were giving me was not theirs. It was not theirs. And at the time, I don't think that I had a plagiarism program on it. And so I kept going through the papers. I graded them. I got to another paper. I got to another paper. It was word for word like the first paper. Well, I'm saying, I know what's happened. I'm reading, I'm grading some more, and I come to another one and a third one. I had 3 students that went out and copied a book review word for word and submitted them. And so, being the nice guy that I am, I took all the papers I took all the papers to class that night. I'll never forget it. And I handed out all the papers except for those 3. And I dismissed the class and asked them to stay. And then I handed the papers out to him, and I said, I gave them an F. And Covington has a policy that if you get caught plagiarizing, especially flagrant plagiarizing, that you have two, you get a warning after the first, after the second, you cannot be a student anymore, right? But some people just don't understand what plagiarism is. I mean, if you read somewhere that there's 66 books in the Bible and 40 authors, that's not plagiarism. That's common knowledge, right? Right, that's not plagiarism. That's just common knowledge. So there are a lot of things that an author may say that you already know. He may have just put it in a little different words, but it's not plagiarism. It's just, but when you come to an idea or a book review, the book review needs to be yours and not somebody else's. I'm asking you to tell me what you thought about the book. I don't care if you thought it was good or bad. I don't really care. I'm going to give you a good grade if you don't like it. In fact, I would rather you tell me you don't like it as much as, I mean, that's just as important to me as if you like it, because I don't, if I have too many students that don't like it, I don't want to use it again. So I put it down, and I'll never forget the silence in the room. Silence is golden, right? I said, okay, here's what we've got here. Every one of y'all have an F. Do you want to know why you have an F? And nobody said a word. And I said, why don't you just pass your paper to the next guy? You'll see that your paper is word for word for these other two papers. You have gone out and cold copied. I told him, I knew where they had copied it from on the review. I said, you just cold copied a book review. What are you doing in the seminary? You're dishonest. You've not given anybody credit. You can't write like this. You're not that good of a writer. I know. I've graded you other papers. There are words in here you don't even know what they mean. Oh, my goodness. You talking about, you know, egg in your face? One of them stuck it out and two of them left. And I was glad that they left. If they couldn't take a rebuke about that, I didn't want them to be a student. I told them, I said, if this is what you're going to do, you're not going to get a degree. So you better figure out that you can go somewhere else and cheat. This is cheating. You're not qualified to be in the ministry if that's what you do. So I don't know how I got off. How did I get off onto that, guys? Somebody help me. I don't know. I don't know. I don't know. Somebody got me sidetracked, right? I'll blame
It's always Marie's fault. It's always
I'll blame
Marie's
it on
fault.
somebody else. Hey, listen, why don't we stop here? I'll start here tomorrow. This is a whole new section. It's kind of a long section on evangelism.
Sir, you ask us if you go too fast. I have to told you a secret. You are a fast reader and we are fast listeners.
Fast listeners. That's right. That's what we want, man. We we want people, you know, I can get through this if you can listen fast. So, what a good day.
Maybe you should get a honorary degree, you know, because you teach us very slowly, you know.
I'm never in a hurry, right? Hallelujah. It's a lot more fun when you're not in a hurry, right? I hate teaching fast. I think I wear my church out sometimes, but who knows? But, you know, it is what it is, right? It's been refreshing for me today, guys. I feel good today. I changed my medication this morning. I didn't take one pill. I didn't take but one pill. I cut my other one down last night to half. No shots. All right, we'll take up tomorrow's Friday, right?
Yes.
I've done 7.5 pages. Golly, what's wrong with y'all? It's your fault.
And you would like to believe you that you are a faster reader?
Yeah, I'm struggling to read through my notes fast enough here. But everybody needs a designated scapegoat, so I'm going to blame all of you all, so I don't get through so fast. So I'm just kidding you. This is fun. I'm enjoying this. I love being able to teach you men, and I appreciate that you even want to listen to me. So, all right. Well, why don't we close? Cornell, you want to close for us today? We'll pick up in the morning. All right.
Yes. Mulțumim, Doamne, din toată inima pentru acest privilegiu de a soarele fratelui Gheri și a învăța din cuvântul Tău. Mulțumim pentru modul minunat în care Tu îl folosești. L-ai folosit pe cursul anilor, l-ai folosit în viața mea personală, în viețile noastre, ai investit în noi într-un mod atât de minunat și Te laud pentru lucrul acesta. Aș vrea să mă rog pentru sănătatea fratelui Gheri, Doamne, mă rog ca Tu să îi dai sănătatea de care are nevoie pentru a se bucura de familie, de chemarea pe care ai dat-o de a ne învăța cuvântul Tău și ne rugăm, Doamne, ca Tu să îi dai vindecare totală dacă este voia Ta. Credem că Tu ai putere. Ne rugăm pentru el, Te rugăm să-l binecuvintezi, să-l ții proaspăt, să ne poată prezenta în continuare cuvântul Tău și să fie o binecuvântare pentru noi studenții din România. Mulțumesc din toată inima pentru fiecare coleg în parte, pentru lucrările la care ne-ai chemat. Te rugăm frumos să ne ajute să rămânem loiali, credincioși Ție până la sfârșitul vieții noastre și să facem lucrarea cu pasiune, cu bucurie și ceea ce am învățat să trăim în viață. Mulțumim pentru această zi minunată, binecuvintează și studiul de mâine și săptămâna viitoare. Numele Tău să fie onorat în veci. Amin.
Amin.
Did we record that session?